A regular tradition now, these South East regional conferences, and those of you who've been to Frimley in the last couple of years will know the sort of form, and it's a lovely chance to meet up with people just after we've had elections, and we can chew over the results, celebrate the victories and work out what to do next. A couple of logistical points which are very important. There's no fire drill planned for today, so if the alarms go off, don't hang around. The fire exits are marked in green either side of the stage, and then also at the back of the hall, marked in green. So very important that. Also, one other logistical point about the venue: is it possible to increase the ventilation at all? Just to the organisers, because it will get quite warm in here. So if there are any more doors, windows or air conditioning that can be cranked up a little or opened a little, that would be very useful. Without, of course, letting in any undesirables in the process, like Al-Qaeda or Liberal Democrats. There is one change to the morning programme, which is that we like always to have an unusual speaker who's not part of the regular run of UKIP speakers and someone you may not have heard before. We've deliberately not put his name on the programme, but he is scheduled to speak to us today, and Rob Burberry will be introducing him to you in due course. So stay tuned, or later. And here to open the proceedings today is the party Honorary President, Geoffrey Titford.
Good morning, conference. Lovely to see you all here again on another packed house. That's the way it should be. Well, we do well. In 1999, this party, UKIP, won 3 seats in the European Parliament. One of them was mine. And they immediately labelled us the protest vote. 10 years later, we win 13 seats. And what is the answer? Oh, it's the protest vote. This year, 24 MEPs, and they have the audacity to keep saying, it's the protest vote. Well, those 3 misguided folk up in Westminster who like to refer to us or our supporters in that way have got to suddenly realise that they can call us what they like, but that number of votes is going up steadily every time. It won't be long before we break through the establishment. And just for the record, Comrades, one of the polling groups, did a survey of the people who voted for UKIP just recently, and the most interesting point of that was that 76% of those that voted for us said they will do so again in a general election next year. You see, I don't care whether the other parties do call us the protest vote, because to them it's a lifelong vote. And UKIP are the sharks just circling around. So as long as Westminster gang cling to this belief, and we shall be there to challenge them all the time, and eventually we're going to beat them. 1956 was a very significant year for me. I married that year in the March, but it was also the year that I became a Eurosceptic. I'd heard of the Schuman plan, and then suddenly I started to hear voices that certain countries in Europe were banding together for so-called trade. And I had to ask myself why. Because, quite honestly, a country always deals more in trade with an adjoining country rather than somewhere else far away across the world. So why was it necessary for them to do this thing? What were they up to? 1956. Nigel Farage hadn't even been born then. You see, it was the civil servants, Monet, Spinelli, the Englishman Slater, who had this wonderful idea of gathering people together. And initially, it was the idea of keeping France and Germany from having beaten the hell out of each other. As they had to, over a long period of history. But it was when the politicians started to get involved that they suddenly changed the agenda. And then it all suddenly became political power, not trade. And that is where their agenda took them, and what has brought us to the situation that we are in today, and why, actually, UKIP has been formed. Nigel, he said that this election would cause an earthquake in British politics. And after the results came in, he proved to be right. But how good he was during that campaign. We must never forget the huge debt we owe to Nigel and his wife Kirsten. Their hard work and their commitment was always great, and at great personal loss. This campaign was particularly torrid, and most of the abuse, verbal, physical, and from the media, was aimed at Nigel. But he has emerged bloodied, but unbowed, and above all, triumphant. So what can we say of the self-styled party of in? Oh yes, they're out. The Lib Dems were tramps and are now imploding in an endless internal war that unfortunately reminds me of UKIP in its earlier days. But for me, one of the toughest things to put up with in this campaign was the Tory mantra of UKIP can't deliver. This from a party that's been talking about reform of the EU for decades, but couldn't even manage to cut one of the visits out from Brussels to Strasbourg. In fact, I don't know whether you remember, they crowed when they thought that they'd won that war, only for the European Court to rule it illegal and had to be reinstated the session back in Strasbourg. They claimed that Cameron had vetoed a treaty, but no treaty was ever offered to them. They claimed to have cut the EU budget, forgetting to mention, of course, that there was actually a real increase in terms, not a cut at all. You know, the Conservative Party, with all their resources, they couldn't deliver a pizza to the right address. And yet, they and the others still think that EU is the answer to everything. We have this week been remembering the landings at Normandy. And great should be those wonderful tributes to those people over there. But I find it very strange that we, UKIP, are now having to storm the defences of our own Parliament in Westminster. And all we wanted, and well still want, is peace, self-government, democracy, and trade. So, ladies and gentlemen, where did it all go wrong? Now, I'm proud of the work you have done in the elections. I'm particularly proud of the candidates in both those elections, the MEPs and the local elections. And well down to the South East for returning not one, not two, not three, but 4 MEPs to Brussels. I know big region. But it was also very wonderful to see that you had the highest vote. I must also give a little nod to my old region, our Eastern region. They got in 3, which was a new achievement for them. And I gather they scored the highest percentage vote of any region in the country. All I can say to you is, carry on the good work. And now, sit back and enjoy the rest of this conference. It's yours.
Well, Eastbourne is always a favourite conference venue, and in fact we held our national conference here in 2011. And again, it shows how the party has grown in recent years. What was previously a national conference venue for us is now a regional conference venue for the South East region alone. And we can still fill the hall just with those of you from the South East. And here to talk a bit about Eastbourne and introduce the branch, we've got 2 speakers who are going to introduce you to Eastbourne. People think of Eastbourne sometimes as being a safe Conservative seat at parliamentary level, forgetting, of course, that it has a Liberal Democrat MP at the moment, who is probably not looking forward to next year's elections. And our standard bearer for next year is Nigel Jones, who you will all know as being one of our MEP candidates in the South East this time. And I'd like at this moment just to pay tribute, not just to the 4 MEPs who were elected for us in the South East, but to the 6 who were not elected, but who have a very bright future ahead of them in UKIP and in on the public stage generally. And as well as Nigel Jones, I'd like to thank Donna Edmonds, Barry Cooper, Alan Stevens, Simon Strutt and Patricia Culligan. In no particular order, just as they happen to spring to mind. I haven't made a list of them, they're all fresh in my mind, for all the hard work that they've put in over almost the last year in going around and campaigning hard. They all deserve our thanks, and I'd like you to welcome Nigel Jones.
Well, thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Eastbourne. Those of you who arrived here on foot will now know why we're called the Sunshine Coast. I was lucky enough to be in Southampton just under a fortnight ago with my fellow Euro MEP to wannabes as the results came in. It was a delightful sensation. And as they posted the town-by-town, region-by-regional results on the notice board, I looked for Eastbourne, and I was astonished by those figures. You have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that Eastbourne was taken by the Liberal Democrats from the Tories, and has always been, since the assassination of Ian Gow in 1990, a Tory Lib Dem margin. But what were the results that we saw? In top place, in Eastbourne, as in the rest of the country, was our party, UKIP, with an astonishing 9,516 votes over the Tories on 7,007, and the Lib Dems languishing in 3rd place on 4,003. This is a tremendous result. It reflects the wonderful work of our party in Eastbourne, who have nearly doubled our membership. We're getting on, approaching the figure of 200, which is a really, really astonishing and delightful figure. So I look forward to taking our banner forward in the general election, and may it come as soon as possible. I'm only sorry it's a year away, or nearly a year away. It's been a wonderful month for UKIP. It's been a wonderful week for UKIP. Some of you may have noticed there was a by-election in Newark. Conservative, who I know quite well, Patrick Mercer, got caught very unwisely for a military man with his hands sort of in the honey pot, and was forced to resign his seat. At very short notice, a by-election was called. The Conservatives were terrified. They were frightened, ladies and gentlemen, that what should have been a safe seat with 16,000 majority was in danger. Not from the allegedly resurgent Labour Party, who held Newark took Newark in the 97 election and held it for one term, not from the Liberal Democrats, of course, but from us, from UKIP. And sure enough, we came from a standing start up in a few weeks for the Scratch campaign to take second place with an enormous swing against the Tories. Predictably enough, this was written off in the media, who one and all, with the possible exception of Daily Express, but the rest of them are anti-UKIP, including the State Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, the institutionally left-wing BBC, I would say. They wrote this up and broadcast it as a failure. Yes, the UKIP bubble had burst. We have been stopped in our tracks. We are going to show them, ladies and gentlemen, that the exact opposite is the case. UKIP are on the way. We have frightened the pants of our shameful Prime Minister, David Cameron. So terrified him that he made, forgetting the governance of the country, no less than 4 visits to Newark to make sure that his stooge candidate got in. He did succeed in holding Newark, but the majority was down by half to 7,000, which was not only a creditable, but a fantastic result for us. We are going to build on that result and are leading the polls in the European elections. And we are going to keep the pressure on all the major parties. I fully expect that David Miliband, that was what was known as a Freudian slip. I fully expect that Ed Miliband will, at some point between now and the election, fall into line and offer a fake referendum on the European Union. I think he has to. The reason that David Cameron has done a total U-turn, don't forget, he whipped his party in October 2011 into voting against a referendum. He has done a total U-turn and promised it, but not yet, in 2017. We have to wait for the unlikely event of David Cameron being returned at the general election with an absolute Tory majority. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he thinks that's going to happen. But he's doing his best to sound like a Eurosceptic. David Cameron has always been a Europhile down to the badges of shame, the star symbol that he used to wear on his cufflinks before he became party leader. He cannot pretend to us that he's anything less. He's putting hair on his chest and standing up to the open federalist Mr. Juncker as the new EU Commission President. And I read in the papers today that Mr. Juncker, as a result, may be forced to withdraw his candidacy. And who will we get in his place? None other, it's said, than Mrs. Stephen Kinnock, the Prime Minister of Denmark. Her stiletto has been thrown into the ring. So the British people, having roundly rejected her father-in-law, Neil Kinnock, in the 92 election, it would be too absurd to elect any member of this family. So another member of the Kinnock family, of the many who are riding the EU gravy train, is going to be booted into office as our leader, the leader of a United States of Europe. Is this really what we have come to? Ladies and gentlemen, I say no. I say we are going to do what the farmer's wife did to the 3 blind mice. The 3 blind mice leaders of the old legacy parties. Over the coming 12 months, we are going to cut off their tails with a carving knife. We are going to boost our results. We are going to win seats in the general election, including the seat where I'm proud to be standing here in Eastbourne. UKIP are not a busted flush. We have not even got going yet. We have come so far in the last year and in the last 20 years. Nothing can stop us now, ladies and gentlemen. We're on our way. Thank you.
To a very interesting fact there, which is that the Prime Minister made 4 visits to Newark during the by-election campaign. Now, really it was Gordon Brown who introduced the practice of Prime Ministers campaigning in by-elections. Up till then, they never used to. Do you know when was the last time a Prime Minister made 4 visits to a seat during a parliamentary by-election? Anyone remember? 1963, and that's because the Prime Minister in question was the candidate. That's how scared Mr. Cameron was. But let's see whether he's able to visit every seat where there's a majority of 16,000 or less in time for the next election. The clock is ticking, Dave. Anyway, without further ado, let me hand over to Bob Lacey, who can tell you a bit more about the local branch in Eastbourne. Bob.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Eastbourne and the South East Area Conference, where if the sun isn't shining, it actually isn't shining anywhere. In fact, today, we've actually ordered a thunderstorm for the drips outside. It's also the town where UKIP comfortably topped the poll in the recent Euro elections, and where our membership has tripled in 1 year. A lot of this is a tribute to our chairman, Alan Tysers, who has unswervingly put forward the UKIP case again and again to the people in Eastbourne. Welcome to a town of 90,000 people, with a hinterland of a similar number, whose hospital services are under constant threat by this government, and where an imploded and diminished Conservative Party hopes and prays that UKIP voters will, like docile sheep, return to the fold for the forthcoming general election and the full all-out council elections next year. We run a 4-year election cycle here in Eastbourne, so we in UKIP are quite looking forward to those elections. Here, Labour Party members are like unicorns. Everyone knows what one looks like, but no one's ever really seen one. The town has a Liberal Democrat MP and a Liberal Democrat local council, in power, but rarely, if ever, in control. I joined UKIP at the end of December 2012. I would have joined earlier, but I didn't believe it was right to actually belong to two different parties in the same year. I was fed up with the arrogant attitude of the Notting Hill elite, who agreed grubby deals with the Liberals, who most political observers could easily point out would renege on any deal, any promise, if it politically suited them, and which they promptly did on free university tuition fees when the keys of the ministerial Daimler were dangled in front of their starstruck eyes. It was apparent from the very outset that they would not keep that promise to reduce their total number of constituencies either. Calamity Clegg was well named, and Disingenuous Dave was little better. There was the extraordinary and uncalled for legislation on gay marriage. There was no mandate for it, and even the gay community had not pressed for it. The shifty, broken promise of a referendum at the EU was thrown to one side, and the constant refrain of the if culture, if I'm elected, if this, if that, maybe next year, these were the promises that were thrown out instead, proved beyond all doubt that Disingenuous Dave had become Dodgy Dave. He wanted power at any price, and he still doesn't get the voters' message. He doesn't know that it is wrong to do that which is not right. Just over a year ago, here in Sussex, we secured significant gains in the county council elections. Overall, we gained 7 seats in East Sussex and 10 in West Sussex. Here in Eastbourne, our story and experience resonate with other constituencies throughout the country. It would probably be true to say that we were ill-prepared for those victories, so we decided to address the perceived problems head-on. We suffered from a low membership base, a lack of suitable candidates, a woefully poor delivery network, and an acute lack of awareness of where our voting strength actually came from. We had been thinking and acting along the existing lines of ward and division structures. Statistically, we had come 3rd in the constituency vote, but actually 2nd in 7 out of the 9 divisions here in Eastbourne. So near and yet so far. Instead of merely participating in future elections, putting up candidates merely to provide an alternative for voters, we resolved to go out and to win. And that is what we've just done in the Euro elections. We held meetings to listen to voters. Attendance started at a dozen enthusiasts and swiftly grew to 75 or 80 for each meeting. Numbers not seen by other parties, Conservative, Lib Dems or Labour, in decades. We shipped in brilliant speakers like the redoubtable Janice Atkinson, the heroine of Eastleigh, Diane James, and the ever-ebullient Ray Finch. People liked them, applauded them at what they heard, and revelled in the opportunity to say what they felt and put forward their views, unconstrained by political correctness, media bias, and ill-timed interruptions from some speakers and who really, in the media, should know better. We even had visits to our meetings from the demoralised Tories, some of them actually joined, and the dispirited Liberals. They tried to influence our meetings, but merely they exhibited their fear. We listened to our new supporters, and this is what they told us. They opposed foreign adventures that resulted in wars that spin out of control and where brave men died for their country. People thought it bizarre to admit 4 million newcomers to Britain and then complained that there's a housing shortage, and suddenly realised there are enormous and unsustainable pressures on school places and hospital services. They felt that £55 million a day contribution to the European Union was a scandalous waste of financial resources. Better surely to have improved local hospital services, fully staffed maternity units, and properly planned infrastructural development instead. They even knew that the EU appointed auditors had refused to sign off the accounts of the EU for a dozen years or more. If that occurred in any British organisation, then that entity would be wound up, and the incompetents would, quite rightly, be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. Here in Eastbourne, we are already advanced in approving prospective candidates for the council elections in May 2015. Many will be in place by September of this year so that they can canvass effectively and become known in the wards that they will be contesting. Under the clear direction of our enthusiastic chairman, Alan Ticehurst, we established a policy forum. Actually, it was his idea, but it's a good idea anyway, which covered the areas of interest in health, education, housing, transport, infrastructure and finance. Each approved council candidate has been automatically assigned membership to the forum and encouraged to take an active role in at least one of those topics. By doing this now, well ahead of the local elections next year, we shall develop a local manifesto which is suitable, practical, achievable and appropriate for our town. And can I finally say that we meet after an historic election victory in the European elections, securing 4 MEP seats in the South East constituency. We're proud of that, and we know that they will go forward and represent our views on the national and European scene. Here in Eastbourne, our votes soared from last year's local elections of 6,000 plus to 9,500 plus, and we all know it could have been more. A massive swing in our political fortune, and we are not intending to surrender that gained advantage. We trounced the Conservatives, who scraped just 7,000 votes, and the ruling Liberal Democrats that have fallen to a miserable 4,000 votes. We have every intention to repeat that magnificent performance once again, only this time we shall do so with a stronger team, a focused and practical political agenda, a super and ever-expanding delivery network, and an enthusiasm that knows no bounds. Our message to our neighbours and friends throughout the southeast of England is straightforward as it is direct. We shall aim for victory without triumphalism. We seek power to crush the inert status quo, and we shall do it all with hard work and good old-fashioned British common sense. Thank you.
Very much, Bob. And could I have the Acts 2 beginners up on the stage now for the next section? So Helena and Chris and Burbs. While they're coming up here, it's obvious from what Bob's been saying, what our next speakers will also show, that UKIP is very much a grassroots party. We're not like the two old parties, Labour and the Conservatives, that have a leadership but not a membership. We've always been a grassroots party, operating at local level, doing things locally, engaged in our communities, and it's fascinating to hear from people who've built up a branch like that in that sort of way. So I very much pay tribute to everyone in the Eastbourne branch who's contributed to that. Our next speaker is someone who did ask to speak at the conference last year, but unfortunately by that stage we had a full programme already, so I had to say no, but promise that we would let him up on the stage for this year instead. He's someone I have a lot of respect for because he was first elected as a councillor at almost the same age that I was, although in my case that's a few years ago now. And he's going to tell you a bit about what it's like serving the community as a UKIP councillor. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Wood.
Thank you very much indeed, conference. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in front of so many of the People's Purple Army in such an absolutely marvellous hall. I've got the easiest bill on the book today. My title of my speech that I've been asked to do is UKIP Winning Here. And we've certainly done that, not here, not everywhere, but in the entire country. In the South East, we won over 32% of the vote. We won in Adam, in Arran, in Ashford and Aylesbury, in Bracknell, Canterbury, Crawley and Dartford, Dover, Eastleigh and here in Eastbourne. We've won in Gravesham, in Gosport, Hastings, Havington, the Isle of Wight, in Lewes, Maidstone, Medway, Milton Keynes and Portsmouth, in Rother, Rushmore, Southokes, Shepway and Southampton, Spelthorne, Swale, Thanet, Tonbridge, Wealdon and Worthing. And we've won councillors over in Berkshire, in Buckinghamshire, in Kent, Surrey, West Sussex and 12 in my county of Hampshire, including 6 in the great naval city of Portsmouth, and next year Portsmouth will be going purple. I'm Chris Wood, I'm both a Hampshire County Councillor and a Fareham Borough Councillor. I joined our party in March of 2012, and within, like many people, a few weeks I was standing as a councillor candidate in a ward which had never had a UKIP candidate before. Well, within 4 weeks we'd gone from nowhere to losing by 4.4% to a Conservative councillor who'd stood for 12 years. And like many, it was bittersweet to come so close, but very unfortunate not to win it. Not to be deterred, I came back like many others as well, and I stood last year. And we achieved a 45% turnout, winning 50% of the vote. And this year, I stood again for Fareham, and we had a 50% turnout, winning nearly 50% of the vote as well. And it is proof that UKIP councillors, when we get out, we do the work, we will keep getting re-elected and we'll keep building our party support base at the bottom, going all the way to Westminster next year. So I often get asked why people voting for UKIP councillors. Are we not just a one-party policy? We just want to leave Europe, maybe control immigration, that's it. Well, it's not the case. We are normal, decent people who care about our local areas. We want to improve where we live. I, for one, have lived in my area all of my life. I care passionately about my area. I went to our local schools. I went to our local nursery group. I know the ins and outs, I know the roads, and it is true of councillors, wherever they live, that they really care and want to get things done. Across our entire county, we have councillors who close bridges, who get the roads repaired, who move trees, who get them cut down, who improve lampposts, sort them out, fix them. They sort out signs. They repair their roads, potholes, they sort litter, they tackle antisocial behaviour, they sort out speed limits and road safety. And we do this across the entire county, across the entire country, and it is what we're elected to do. We get on, we do it, we improve our areas. We also hold the others to account. We don't run the council on Hampshire, but my word, they know we're there. I myself, I'm our spokesman on children and young people, as you probably would have guessed, but I sit on our Children and Young People Select Committee, and it was only after I requested a recorded vote on which councillors would support a cut in the short breaks for disabled children's budget, which would have meant the budget being reduced by 1.8 million down to £1 million. reducing the number of disabled children who can enjoy a short break from 5,500 to only 1,800. These people have done nothing wrong. It's not their fault for the economic crisis. They're the ones we should be protecting, and I would not accept that these cuts would be made. So we sit on this task and finish group. We look the officers in the eye. We tell them, no, this is not what we're going to accept. Find different ways to save the money. And so far, we've found £800,000 worth of savings without cutting any of the existing services, and I'm sending it back with the rest of our committee to the Cabinet saying, no, we will not accept another £1 million. This service must be protected. But we can't win anything. Everything. I sit on Fareham Borough Council as well, but I'm the only UKIP councillor on Fareham Borough Council. My first decision, the first act I made, was to turn around to them and say, I believe I should be sitting on this outside body, the Daily Strategy Group. It's an enterprise zone. It's in my ward, it's in my division. My house backs onto the airfield, and it's the only thing we had debated in the entire council, the only thing we had a recorded vote on, and I lost by 29 votes to 1. But we fight on, we continue. We're in the papers, we will make sure that what I want is done, that our area is protected, and that we get our bypass to protect our village. Our UKIP councillors, we make sure that we continually grow across the entire country. We work in our local areas to prove that UKIP is competent. We take action. We control the budgets, our newsletters then inform. This builds our supporters base. We find more helpers, which means we save some of our own shoe leather. We get access to the local media, and we keep the UKIP message going to the public wherever we are in the entire country, in the southeast. We get things done, we get ourselves out there, people know that UKIP is around, and this is how we build for next year. We will not win a general election in a seat if we can't elect councillors to that area. We have to get it done, we have to get in there, we have to prove that we can win. And I tell you what, we're doing just that. Councillors right across the country. It is absolutely vital that we prove to the public that we can do what we're elected to do. Now, I publish all of my electoral expenses right on the front of my leaflet. There's no expenses being claimed by anyone in the whole of Hampshire. We don't claim travel, we don't claim food, we don't claim accommodation. UKIP is there for the people. We get things done, we really do respect it. I'd just like to finish by saying thank you to all of the helpers who help councillors like me to be able to deliver the leaflets, to knock on doors, to talk to people, to put the UKIP message across, because this is what is going to be vital ahead of next year. The general election is the big one. We've won the Europeans, which we set out to do. That's mission accomplished. Next year is a general election. We will win candidates, we will win MPs across the entire country, because we are right, our message is correct, and we are fighting for a better future for our country. Thank you very much.
I don't know how Chris can wear a three-piece suit when it's as hot as it is in here. Because I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but up here I'm sweating like Eric Pickles. Is it possible to get a bit more ventilation in here? Perhaps the doors at the back open or something like that? Anything to increase the flow of air?
The doors at the back are open, we can't hear you. Too much conversation out there.
Well, if I could just say to the authorities, anything you can do to increase the airflow would be very much welcome, I'm sure, by all of us. In introducing our next speaker, Chris Wood has talked about UKIP protecting services at council level. It's equally important that we protect our green and pleasant land. So I'd like to introduce the formidable chairman of the East Surrey UKIP, Councillor Helena Windsor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Are you feeling purple? And for the wonderful thank you. It's much better than looking at me big. Right, this is part of the Surrey Hills, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty, and I've chosen it because when I grew up in Beckenham, in the sprawl of suburban roads outside London, the outskirts of London, that were built in the 1930s. And when I moved out of the suburban sprawl, this is where I came to. This is actually taken from Tatsfield, and that's where I first moved to when I first hopped over the border from Kent into Surrey. And this is about as close as you can get in Surrey to where Nigel lives. So, the Metropolitan Greenbelt was the first area of protected open land. Now, there are greenbelts around other cities in the UK, but London led the field, and that dates back to 1938. So, what is the greenbelt? This is the greenbelt, the Metropolitan Greenbelt that surrounds London. I think, this is why I've put this up on the screen, because I think you need to see it. And you can see that it covers great swathes of eastern and southeast region, and it was there to stop the suburban sprawl from reaching right down to our southeast coast here, London stretching right down to Eastbourne and stretching across to Clacton and Frinton-on-Sea in Essex. And you can see that you've got Buckinghamshire, you've got lots of Surrey, and you've got Kent. So let's have a look. Now, I'm not going to apologise for focusing on the southeast. I've put the southeast up here just to show you just what quantity of the southeast area is covered by greenbelt, because there's obviously some London boroughs as well that have greenbelt, particularly on the outskirts. And you see that topping the field is Sevenoaks in Kent with 34,000 hectares. And then there's a lot in Surrey. I represent one of the divisions in Tambridge, and we've got 23,300. Guildford tops the Surrey lead. And I'm going to focus now on Surrey because I'm a Surrey County Councillor, and actually I'm proud of Surrey's history with respect to the Greenbelt. If you want to talk about what effect HS2 is going to have in Buckinghamshire, I'm sure Chris Adams will be delighted to enlighten you. So Surrey County Council actually considers that it can claim to be the creator of our Greenbelt, because it had the countryside estate formed in 1931, from which they consider was the basis of the London Greenbelt, and as I said, was 1938. So, at a council meeting on the 19th of March 2013, this was the last council meeting before I was elected, they actually resolved to protect the Greenbelt. Now, this motion was brought by Councillor Ian Beardsmore. He's a Lib Dem. Now, please don't hold that against him. There's a few good eggs in that basket, and this guy, I think he does understand the meaning of the two words in their party name, Liberal and Democrat. Funny how most of them don't seem to know what that means, do they? Either word. And he put a motion forward. It was diluted a little bit. He suggested that the council should oppose any government move to weaken Greenbelt legislation. The Tories, and bear in mind there are 58 of them to 23 of the rest of us, we don't very often get many of our motions through. They amended that to say that they should stick within the national planning policy framework. Not sure that that really gives the adequate protection to Greenbelt, but he decided to go with it, and it was a unanimous verdict. They respected the county history, and you'll see there that it says they were going to make the district and borough councillors aware of this decision. Now, there's a good reason for this. They will do everything in their power. Power. What power do I have in Surrey County Council? Well, we have to do a lot of infrastructure mopping up. There's an awful lot of schools, new schools building and school extensions going through at the moment, just to try and keep up with the amounts of extra housing that's been being built in the various boroughs and districts. But when it comes to power, I think the pit bull in purple is muzzled. I can growl a lot, and believe me, I will growl, and I'll keep growling on my residents' behalf. But I'm muzzled. A lot of it comes down to the district and boroughs, and their decisions and the pressure that's put on them. So they're under tremendous pressure from the government. They're also under tremendous pressure from the developers. Now, here's one little glitch. If you build on brownfield land, if you do a conversion, guess what? You pay 20% VAT. If you go and dig up a nice farmer's field, and of course the farmer, struggling as he does, often through EU legislation, he's going to get some money for this. This is great. No VAT. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? So they're under pressure. And if I just, as I said, I'm going to be fairly Surrey-centric here. Just focus a little. Guildford. We said we had the greatest area of Greenbelt. Wisley Airfield position to build something like 2,500 homes there. And then obviously a commercial area, and then you'll need the infrastructure on top of that. And that's all in greenbelt area. It's no surprise that we've got a problem in Tandridge. Now I'm going to put a little advert out here. Any of you who live in the area, starting from the 17th to the 20th, we've got an inquiry. This is from the developers. Because Tandridge had its local plan, it had, in agreement, the number of houses that it was supposed to build. It's actually exceeding them. It had it all organised that they didn't have to build on greenbelt or threaten greenbelt. But no, last year we had the Hearn report, which is basically a developer's charter. And there was a lot of argument in the council meeting, which I went to on behalf of my residents in the public gallery, and they couldn't accept it. They had to agree to receive it. Interesting. But yes, Tandridge is under tremendous pressure. And then in Mole Valley, Greenbelt Boundary Review. They don't give it that name, but that's what it really means. And I know that in the whole of Mole Valley they're fighting. And it's not just housing. They recently had this problem at Churncley where they want to turn it into a golf course. It's an economic issue. Then we have the airport expansion, the runways. We have, in Surrey, we have both Heathrow up the northern end, and we've got Gatwick Airport. Now the latest plans, they're suggesting they've upped the number of jobs they think they'll create to 122,000. Now you think, great, job creation, this is wonderful. But actually, we haven't got that much of a shortage of jobs in the area. We're reasonably well placed. What that's going to mean is to fill those jobs, you're going to bring people in from outside. They need somewhere to live. They need hospital services, they need doctors, we need transport facilities, they need schools if they bring their families with them. Where in Sussex and Surrey are we going to put those homes? Now, let's talk about the districts and the councils. What's going to happen? What's the cause? Well, I'm going to have to mention the N word now, migration. When we've had, in the last few years, in spite of what the current government pledged, net migration running at or just under 200,000 a year, they've got to live somewhere. We can't send them back. But in the South East, I would argue that's not the main driver. In some of these plans, in some of the boroughs and districts, they're talking about, they're planning for a 60% inward migration. They don't mean people coming from other EU countries, they don't even mean people coming from the rest of the world. They mean anywhere in the UK, and in particular London, because ordinary Londoners are being driven out by the sky-high prices there. And so they're coming out into the country areas and trying to live there and commute. And yet, ironically, a lot of commuters originally came for this, for the countryside. And the problem is that once it's gone, if we allow building on this, once it's gone forever. And this is what you've got in its place. So what can we in UKIP do about it? Well, as I said, the decisions on residential planning, they're agreed at borough and district level. And what a wonderful talk Chris Wood gave. Didn't you enjoy that? Are you all ready to go out and win? Because that's what we've got to do next year. We've got to convert those second places. Now, second places are very nice. You stood as a candidate, oh, they like it. You come second, you've increased the percentage, you're getting there, but actually you don't have to do anything. But we need to win. So next year, this is what we need to do in the districts and boroughs. Paint it purple, everybody. Get out there and win. But it is not going to save the greenbelt. Even if we had UKIP-controlled councils, we're still going to be up against a lot of pressure. We've got to go further than that. This is where we need to go, ladies and gentlemen, because it's not just the migration, it's the general economy. It is so London-centric. Until we start to get government legislation, government carrots, which encourage businesses to go and set up and develop in the areas where you can pick up houses for £10,000 or £20,000 because nobody wants them, because there's no work there. They're depressed areas, they need the business, they need the regeneration. In the South East, yes, of course we want to keep vibrant, but we don't need concrete jungle, and I think you'd agree with that. So there's only one thing to do. In 2015, we have to paint Westminster purple. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helena. Now, every good campaign needs a good campaign manager. And one person who's already familiar to you from the Police and Crime Commissioner elections and from the County Council elections last year and all through this campaign is Rob Burberry, who's done this well for us. Now, we picked him back in November to be the campaign manager for the South East of England European elections. And I remember saying to him at the time when we signed him up for it, I said, well, Rob, we'll see you through to the South East Conference as well, and you can organise that. It won't take long. You know, you'll have already been involved doing the campaign and everything. It's just a couple more weeks at the end. But until the 7th of June, we own your soul. And at midnight tonight, he gets it back again. So, in a spirit of celebration, therefore, Rob Burberry.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I've never been wolf whistled before. That was an experience. Looking at the programme, it says that I need to speak about the European election results. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm not going to do that in great detail. This afternoon, we have a presentation whereby, for the geeks among you, we'll have a map of the South East region, and it's shaded purple, or not, depending on how heavy our vote was. So there are some constituencies where the map is deeply purple, some it's sort of a pale sort of violet. But we're doing very, very well. So Parliament, it's an indicator for the parliamentary elections next year. So I'm not going to go into great detail about the European election results, because you'll see that this afternoon. So that then gives me a bit of a dilemma, because the conference programme says that I'm going to speak about the European election results. So I've given some thought as to how I can really summarise it succinctly and whilst reflecting on the huge success of going from 1 to 4 MEPs in the South East of England. And I think it can be summed up simply like this. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Oh yes, excellent. I was saying to Diane James not too much during the campaign. I didn't want to suggest that she was a dead cert, shall we say, at getting elected. Given that the campaign was on my shoulders, I didn't particularly want to guarantee anyone being elected. But I have to say that had I not got Ray elected in the 4th position, I would have probably been a little bit disappointed. So I'm delighted with the campaign. It wasn't cheap. These things aren't, are they? You probably recognise this, that this was our national election address during the campaign. It was actually rather just a leaflet. We went one better and created this booklet where you see all our South East candidates, poster, which of course you all put up, didn't you? I mean, make it worth spending the money with it. And then some policies and a final call to action on the back. The thing is to cover over 4 million homes in the South East of England. To do that, it cost us £60,000. I'm actually being polite because it's over that. £60,000. So, with thanks to our members at Eastbourne, I dispatched one of them earlier to buy some crab buckets. Seriously, we'll put them back in the foyer. So when we leave, we're going to be shaking the crab buckets at you. There'll be no crabs in them, but hopefully there'll be some paper money, if you don't mind, because it does rather cost a lot. Now, Nigel called me this morning. He's got a busy summer now because we've, of course, had a very successful election. We've now got double the MEPs we had. We have the most MEPs out of any United Kingdom political party, which is fantastic. But that means now, at least now, he's got a team, a big team, to draw talent from. And so, of course, he'll be working on that over the summer. Now, what he and I were discussing this morning is what members, branches, activists, you can do for the party in the coming months. And he said to me this morning, membership and fundraising. I've already touched on the fundraising side of things because, I mean, the campaign doesn't just happen out of thin air. Everything costs money, and it's painful writing the cheques, unless we win, which we did. So membership and fundraising, we need to expand Nigel's People's Army, ultimately. There are people that are coming on board. Month by month, our members are increasing. 38,000 I'm hearing now. When the party I joined, it was just a mere 14, 15,000. It's not the UKIP of 2 years ago, that's for sure. So, step one. This is what you are going to do, isn't it? I hate being like that. I can be nice from midnight again. So we're going to leaflet because we've been saying please to the electorate. We've been saying please vote for us. So we now have a leaflet for you. Yes, you are going to deliver another leaflet. I know it's at Eastbourne and holiday and that, but you don't think we were going to just give you a holiday after election, surely. So we've got this. It's the next leaflet, national leaflet. No, it's not free, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. So we're saying thank you to the electorate for giving us that fantastic result. Picture of Nigel there at the polling station saying thanks for your support from UKIP and Nigel Farage. And then on the other side of it, there's a picture of our 4 South East MEP candidates on the night of celebration in Southampton. Our challenge in 2015, change British politics for good. I won't read the leaflet out to you, you'll be able to see it. This artwork's ready to go. And you'll notice when we have coffee later on, just through that curtain into the Congress suite, tea and coffee is available in there as well as our exhibitors. One of our exhibitors is called Finch MEP, a company that we use quite a lot. This artwork's ready to go. Go and see Pete in the coffee break and order some leaflets for your branch. Because as much as it's important to say please vote for us, it's also important to say thank you. This is what my mother taught me anyway, good manners, you see. So we need to do good manners. We need to thank you for the election. Now, as Roger said just a moment ago, I think I need to go and see my doctor because this is not the only election that I've managed. I started off with the Police and Crime Commission election a few years ago. I then managed the National County Council campaign last year and then on to this. And going back to the Police and Crime Commissioner election, the reason why the party chose me for that is because I have a history in a background in policing anyway. I joined Surrey Police in 1996 as a special constable, less respectfully known as called a hobby bobby, but due to the police's increasing reliance on people who give up their Friday nights for free, that term is being less used nowadays. So during my time there, 7.5 years with Surrey Police, I was awarded 2 commendations and the Golden Jubilee Medal for my service. Then I was about 18 months away from a nice red, white and black long service and good conduct medal. And I thought, this is ridiculous. If I love it this much, I'm doing it for free, I might as well join. So I did, but the London waiting drew me into Village Transport Police, and I worked on their response team in central London. But throughout my time in Surrey, the one constant from 1996 to 2003 was just constant cuts, with less and less police officers being available, and now we have a situation where police stations are being closed, and the borough where I used to work, which is actually the borough where Diane James is the councillor, has scant police compared to when I joined the Surrey Police in 1996. It's therefore a great pride and honour to introduce to you somebody who's been an officer in the Army Reserve for 40 years, has conducted 2 tours of Iraq and wrote a strategic policing plan for Iraq, has been a senior police officer for 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the Independent Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey, Kevin Helena.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to your conference today. It would be remiss of me not to mark this for what is in fact in political terms a quietly historic moment. It is the first time that a Police and Crime Commissioner has addressed a party conference. Indeed, it is doubly interesting that it is an independent Police and Crime Commissioner speaking to one of the new emerging forces in politics. It is, frankly, a bit of a statement that the public's view on politics is changing, that I'm here and you're here. I want to talk to you about my role as a Police and Crime Commissioner, and I also want to tell you about what you can do to help me and colleagues like me up and down the country deliver on it. My primary role as a Police and Crime Commissioner is to keep the public in my county safer, and I do that by, of course, working with the police, working with the borough and district councils, working with the Crown Prosecution Service, the court service, probation, prison et al. To make it better. But I've got one major problem and I need your help with it, and I'll talk about that later. My 40 years as a reservist with the Army enabled me to understand how the military go about war fighting, doing what they do. And they talk about the various components they need for fighting for delivery. They need equipment, they need training, they need the tactics, strategy, and most of all, they need what they call the moral component for delivery. What is the moral component? It's heart, it's morale, it's will to deliver, will to get it done, to go forward in the face of adversity. That's why our young servicemen and women have done so well against all the odds recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. The moral component. Turning then to my learning from being a police officer and my experiences now as a Police and Crime Commissioner. The police every day are themselves in a slow-burning conflict, if you like, a small, slow war. Every day they go out, generally alone, to deal with violent bullies, criminals, thieves, thugs, antisocial elements, and they generally do it on their own. Now, I could talk to you about equipment and how the 28 police stations I once had in Surrey have been cut to just 3. I could talk to you about numbers and how the 16,000 police officers who were once brought into London to quell the riots of 2 years ago have been cut off the books. But I won't. I'll talk to you about the moral component for police officers. What makes them go out there and do the right thing for us? Why is it that last week 2 police officers on patrol heard a call of someone driving a car drunk, high speed, on the wrong side of a 3-lane motorway? Why is it they got in their car and drove head-on into that oncoming vehicle to save the public behind them? They put their blood and bone in front of the other members of the public. Why is it only 2 days ago in Surrey, 2 young police officers spent 12 minutes giving CPR to a 2-year-old child victim of a motorway accident and saved their lives? It's because it's in their heart, it's in their soul, it's the moral component. One wonders sometimes why the police get kicked and knocked so often, but we'll talk about that later. Just how are our police in this country doing? Sir Robert Peel, the founder of modern policing as we know it throughout the world, said, "The primary object of an efficient police is the prevention of crime. The next, the detection and arrest of offenders. By these efforts alone, police will be judged. The prevention of crime, the detection and arrest of offenders." So just what are our police doing for us at the moment? Well, prevention of crime. Crime has fallen year on year, regardless of what government has been in power. Murder is down, robbery is down, burglary is down. Assaults are down. Crime is falling. Crime is being prevented. What about the arrest and detection of offenders? Well, we imprison more people in this country than any other country in Europe. And do you know what? The prisons are full. And it wasn't the RSPCA who put them there. It was the police. So if the prisons are full and crime's falling, they can't be all that bad, can they? So why is it I am confronted with my biggest problem, which is the maintenance of the morale and motivation of the police workforce? Why is it the people who are giving me the biggest problem are people up in Westminster who continually criticise and carp about the police? Why is it that historical examples of police failings, and yes there are, historical examples of police failings from the past, some so old they're almost archaeological, are regularly rolled out in a continual litany of why the police are so bad? What's behind it? Is it helping? I can tell you no. If we want a police officer to go out of one of our few police stations and look for criminals and confront wrongdoing, then we've got to back and support them. We can't tell them, stop doing stop and search, and if you get it wrong you'll be sacked, because that's what they believe at the moment. I want my police officers in my county to go out there and stop and search anyone they suspect is a known offender. I don't want them looking over their shoulder and wondering if they're going to be called to account and sacked because they may or may not have got it wrong. At the moment, there is a slow, insidious wasting away of the commitment and discretionary goodwill of our police service. Being no doubt about it, I come from a family of 9 police officers and I know what they say and I know what goes on. They are far from perfect, but frankly, we just heard they're not that bad. You do not get a loyal dog to go out and protect you against the wolf by kicking and beating it all the time. Enough is enough. If I asked you as a group of people to do one thing for me, go out there and stop all this carping about the police and criticising them. The next... They are, frankly, all we've got. Take one thing away from this, if you would, for me, please. The next police officer you see walking down the road or you come into contact, do one thing. Say this: thank you, officer, for what you're doing for us. We appreciate it.
It's always an interesting dimension when we have an independent or non-UKIP speaker at a UKIP conference. Kevin Hurley is independent, we respect that very much, and we thank him very much for coming to speak to a partisan audience. Thank you once again.
Well, that's a welcome and a half, goodness me. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming to Eastbourne to recognise what UKIP's achieved in a very, very short time. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that I've been part and parcel of that. And it's been a sheer pleasure to work with you, to work on your behalf, and to contribute to what undoubtedly will be a continuing success for UKIP and UKIP in the UK political scene. Now, when I was driving down here this morning, I was just reflecting on how some of our political counterparts might be viewing this weekend. And I had this little image in my mind of David Cameron sitting down to breakfast this morning and having a quick chat with Sam and thinking, how did the last week go? And there he was, or there he is, or was, with his orange juice, his toast and goodness knows what else, and reflecting on a very, very busy few weeks. Despite the fact that Parliament wasn't in sitting, he managed to make 4 visits to Newark. He managed to whip all of his MPs and all of the Conservative Party PPCs at risk of delivering a career-limiting move if they didn't go to Newark to campaign, all to try and hold back Nigel's People's Army. Fascinating, isn't it? Now remember, this is a Prime Minister that when challenged to a debate with Nigel Farage, said, I'm too busy running the country. Well, I had a bit of fun on election night, as some of you may well know. I took part in the Daily Politics show, Week in Politics If You Wish, with Andrew Neil. And I'm going to quote from the Labour MP that was sat there with me, because his comment just really made it for me. And it was, quote, the Conservatives threw the kitchen sink at Newark. They threw the butler sink, they threw the washing up liquid, and they threw the Arga. And look where they came. Fantastic for us. So David, I'll leave you in misery in a moment, but can I just leave you with one message from Diane James, MEP-elect, one of 24 that UKIP is sending to the European Parliament. You survived a skirmish, but you still haven't won the war, and watch out. Just think though, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm looking very much towards the future, but just quickly remind yourselves, UKIP is only 20 years old, and yet in 3 years, roughly speaking, the impact we've had on the political scene here in the United Kingdom has been humongous. The fact that every time we have a conference like this, we have the national media looking at us. At the European elections result, the international media watching, just, waiting for that moment when we actually do deliver that breakthrough. But don't denigrate, please, and don't allow anybody to criticise or denigrate what we achieved on Thursday. Because we never, ever, I don't believe, thought we could win. It was in our dreams, I don't doubt that, and I said as much during that TV programme. But to crack open a staunch Tory seat with 26% of the vote, repeating exactly what we did in Eastleigh, where we cracked open a Liberal Democrat seat, and then what John Bickley delivered in Wythenshawe and Sale. My goodness, no wonder they're quaking in their boots. Nigel has used the phrase, creating an earthquake. And I still stand by that. It's exactly the phrase, and it reflects exactly what UKIP is delivering. Now, earthquakes happen, as you all know, because there are fault lines. Fault lines in the earth, and equally fault lines in other areas. And the fault lines here, as we all know, is because the 2 other Westminster parties, Labour and Conservatives, even I smile when I say that, sorry about that. They recognise first of all, how much change we brought about and how much threat we represent. Now, I made a wager just after Eastleigh when I said there wouldn't be another by-election in the United Kingdom before the 2015 general election. And the reason I made that point was because the parties, the other Westminster parties, recognised the degree of threat, the scale of threat, and the quality of threat that UKIP represents. And there are people in this audience, a lot of you I know, who either came to Eastleigh, you went up to Wythenshawe and Sale, you went to Wales, you went to Scotland, and ultimately you came to Newark. And it's interesting, you came because you believe in what we're doing. You didn't need to be whipped, you didn't need to be on a whiteboard to say if you don't come, you're going to be criticised and vilified. You came because you believe in what UKIP stands for. And I still will say to any of the other MPs currently in Westminster, representing what I still call the 3 failed political parties, just watch out, because we are delivering and we will win. And you can choose to have skirmish after skirmish with us, but ultimately we will deliver. Some of the phrasing after UKIP, quite interesting. Did you all see the UKIP juggernaut halted in its tracks? Goodness me, I'm surprised they didn't come up with the UKIP fruitcake crumbled. I mean, they could have done. Well, I still prefer that the Conservative Party is running out of steam. And I'll give George Osborne a bit of credit. I don't normally do that. But when he can open his comments by saying, the Conservatives can take some comfort, doesn't it say to all that he is prepared to preface his comments, recognising that the effort, the resource, everything that went into UKIP still held that seat, but look at where Roger Helena is now. A real credit to this party and showing that we can crack open a staunch Tory seat. In this audience who've probably seen their lives change over the last 18 months. I'm talking about the newly elected borough, district and county councillors. Across the country, there's over 300 of those, and there are also apparently over 850 who in May alone this year came a very, very close second. Now, I attended a count in Mole Valley in Surrey, and I saw a UKIP member who'd worked his socks off miss out on becoming elected by 13 votes. That, ladies and gentlemen, can we just clap all of those people? So far, the pinnacle of what UKIP's achieved, and rightly so. The first time neither of the 2 supposedly recognised major parties, Conservatives and Labour, didn't win a national election. And UKIP, well done, really well done. So looking to the future, some messages I've got for the other politicians out there. Wake up and smell the coffee, I think would be the first one. If you think you can carry on doing UK politics as you have done, you really haven't got real. And I made the point during a number of speeches that I gave during the Euro election campaign that there seems to be some problems out there with the other parties. They're either ignoring what's going on, they've either got early hearing loss, they've either got short-term amnesia, or they've got clinical delusion. And I'm not denigrating anyone who suffers from any of that, but when you've got supposedly able, intellectual, intelligent individuals who are elected to the House of Commons, and yet they still come out with trite comments, we will listen to the voters, and they've got no intention of listening and doing anything, there is something fundamentally wrong. Let's get on to some serious stuff just for a moment there. In 3 years, we've gone from being ridiculed, we've gone from sort of being looked at as, no, this can't be happening, to one where there's actually outright war against UKIP. And it doesn't give me any pleasure to remind everybody what party members are going through, what activists are going through, what people like myself are going through now that we've been elected to office. It's not nice, it takes a lot of courage, but we're so committed to what we're doing that we will continue. And therefore I send some messages back to the other political parties. Remind yourselves, gentlemen and ladies, tribal politics is changing out there. You can't just assume that because you're in the North East, you can take the Labour vote for granted. You can't assume that down in deepest blue Surrey, you can take the Conservative vote for granted. And you can't assume in those sprinklings of orange stroke yellow that you can still take a Liberal Democrat vote for granted. We have shown over and over and over again that we have a good enough, we will match them in terms of our campaign strategy, in terms of our candidates, in terms of the individuals that support us, and the fact that those people will come out on every occasion and they don't need whipping or threatening or doing anything else unpleasant to deliver that. We also at the moment don't need to import people. We don't need an Australian, a South African or an American to tell us that what works in those countries has a place here in the United Kingdom. And if anything, I think it's a really poor reflection on the three Westminster parties that they feel it's appropriate to bring that really negative campaigning to this country. And it's just not on an So looking forward, we've all now focused on May 2015, unless of course the Prime Minister calls a snap general election, just in case. We've got before us a zombie parliament, being remarked upon by the press as exactly that, and some of the MPs actually agree. And it's going to be a zombie parliament, not only because they won't be in the House of Commons, enacting, really quite nothing type legislation, but because David Cameron and Nick Clegg and Ed Miliband expect their MPs to be out there trying to counter the threat that UKIP represents. So every speaker today will be making the point. The general election campaign is underway. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. But all I ask is stand together, react together, don't be dissuaded, and just keep that People's Army on the march, because we will take seats, I believe, in the 2015 general election, and at that stage, ladies and gentlemen, my goodness, there'll be a celebration. Thank you very much.
People's Army really will be on the march. It's wonderful that we now have 24 MEPs of the calibre of Diane and others who are going to be leading that charge for us over the next 12 months, along with many other excellent prospective parliamentary candidates who've already been adopted here across the South East region and elsewhere in the country. We're going to be with them as ordinary volunteers like myself, fighting with them, fighting for them over the next 12 months to make sure that we get that bridgehead at Westminster for the first time. And will you all join with me in giving them the support that we it often makes me laugh when I hear that UKIP is a one-man band or just a protest party or something. Because when I look at the speakers that we've had already today and booked for this afternoon, and all of you here in the audience, and I think, is this what we think of as being a one-man band? No, because UKIP already has people of this sort of calibre, of Diane and others. We are a grassroots party. We're not a top-down party, as was said earlier. We are a party of volunteers, of the grassroots, We're not simply a party of defectors from one other party, as the SDP was. We're not the party of big corporate interests like the Conservatives or big trade union interests like the Labour Party. We are a party of ordinary people, not dependent on any of those special interests, either for our support, or for our funding, or for our parliamentary interest. And that is part of our great strength as a party. When we were planning this event, when we were planning it, we were thinking, well, who would be the best person to introduce our next speaker? Because that's always a key part, to give him a nice welcome. And we did think of asking Nick Clegg, because he did a favour for us, so it seemed only fair to give him a moment in the limelight while he still can. But sadly, Nick couldn't be here today. And so the task falls to me to introduce to you, once again, the man under whose leadership we've won hundreds of council seats, who's doubled our number of MEPs, who's more than doubled our party's membership, who helped increase our vote in Newark sixfold since the last general election, who's caused an earthquake in British politics, Nigel Farage MEP.
Thank you. You know, that's exactly the kind of welcome I'm expecting the UKIP 24 MEPs to get in Strasbourg next month. It's been a pretty remarkable couple of months. And despite the fact that we've had just about everybody in the establishment, in large sections of the media, and certainly the whole political class, despite the fact it's felt at times that absolutely everybody has been against us, despite that, the People's Army have triumphed and we won the European election. Isn't that amazing? I said we caused an earthquake in British politics, and I think we have. And we've got them all absolutely terrified. And what an amazing achievement here in the southeast of England, in what has always been regarded as the Tories' own backyard. We in UKIP topped the poll and have now got 4 of us elected to the European Parliament. An amazing achievement. And I have to say, also for me, a great sense of relief. Because the last 10 years, I've effectively been the sole UKIP MEP in this region. Now, I'm not going to look backwards, because there's no point in doing that. But what I do know, knowing the other 3, and having sat down with them, that I've now got the backup and support in this region that I've desperately wanted for the last 10 years. And I think with 4 of us out there, and with you working with us and behind us, I think we're going to stun them in the general election in May next year. So let's look forward to that. When we topped the poll in those European elections, the response and the reaction from Westminster was very predictable. They gather round themselves the comfort blanket of saying, don't worry, it's only a protest vote. And it's funny, isn't it, because they said that at the last European elections in 2009, when we came second across the country. They said it's just a protest vote. And then last year, in the English county elections, when we got a quarter of the vote, they said, don't worry, it's just a protest vote. And then in the European elections this year, we topped the poll across the United Kingdom, and they say, don't worry, it's just a protest vote, it's going to melt away, it's going to disappear, until 10 days later, despite the Conservatives mounting their biggest ever by-election campaign in history, UKIP comes in with 26% of the vote, with Roger Helmer, our candidate in Newark, and they still think it's just a protest vote. Well, my message to Westminster is, you can think it's a protest vote if you want to, but I'm now convinced that it's going to be a permanent protest vote. It's staying with UKIP. They've been amazing results. We've done incredibly well in the local elections too, not just with 161 new wins, but over 800 seconds. But now we face the summer, and this for UKIP has to be a summer of consolidation and a summer of preparation for the events of 2015. To have got where we are with the resources we've got and the numbers we've got has been remarkable. But if we're going to, next year, get into Westminster enough people, as I believe we can, to hold the balance of power, wouldn't that be fun? You know, the Lib Dems did it last time, didn't they? You know, Clegg and Cameron, and that lovely morning in the Rose Garden. But I can assure you, that if we find ourselves in that position next year, if we find ourselves holding the balance of power in that next Parliament, we'll drive a damn sight better bargain than Clegg and the Liberal Democrats drove, and we will make sure that there will be a referendum in this country. But to get there, we have to be bigger and better than we are at the moment. Now, I would say to all of you in the branches, the volunteer wing of the party, and many of you, I'm sure, have worn out a fair bit of foot leather over the course of the last few months, but I would say to all of you, this is the summer for us to build our branches and to build our membership. Now, almost every day, when I'm out, travelling around the country, people say to me, we voted for you, we're going to vote for you next year, how do we now join the party? There are people out there that want to join this party, and what we've got to do is to go out and engage with them. And I know that Rob Burberry spoke to you earlier about the idea of printing and putting together this thank you leaflet. And the idea is we put those out across the south and the north and the east and the west. We put that out in large numbers, and there will be people out there who voted for us, who were delighted that we've won, who will respond to that message of us saying thank you, now can you please help put your shoulder to the wheel and join our people's army. So that's what the branches and the activists and the members I'm asking to do over the course of this summer. You've also got to get your prospective parliamentary candidates for next year in place, and the campaign has to begin. We've actually got to start promoting our candidates from September this year to give us a proper run-in to the election. And the other thing that the branches have got to think about, and I think it's beholden actually on the four of us as MEPs and Chris Adams and the others that work with us, the other thing we've got to do is we've actually got to start raising money at branch level to fight effective election campaigns next year. And sometimes members of UKIP, branch officers of UKIP are slightly daunted by the prospect of raising money, but actually it isn't very hard. All you have to do is to organise a social event, because what you'll find is UKIP members, supporters and voters are a pretty sociable lot. It'll work, it'll work. So they're the things that I very much want for the party to do. And at a national level, I think there's no doubt that this is the most important summer that UKIP has ever had. We have a huge amount to do to up our game to get ourselves ready to be effective next year. Now, I've come in for some criticism. Well, I've come in for lots of criticism, actually. For all sorts of things, most of which aren't even true, but never mind. I've come in for some criticism. Oh, well, you know, all Mr. Farage talked about in the last few months is our membership of the European Union, the fact we have an open border and can't do anything about it, You know, why are we not hearing the broader UKIP policies? Well, the reason, folks, actually was quite simple. We were fighting a European election campaign, and they are the issues that I wanted us to fight on. But now is the time to broaden. Now is the time to show people where we stand on defence. And by the way, isn't it absolutely shaming to think that a Conservative-led administration has turned Portsmouth from being a working naval dockyard into effectively being a museum? Isn't that absolutely shaming? And we have to get our tax policy right and clear in that manifesto, and make sure that every voter in Britain understands that UKIP believes that nobody who is earning minimum wage should be paying income tax. We've got to give people real incentives to get off benefit and to get out into the world of work. That's what we're going to say. And we've got to absolutely own the territory of social mobility. You know, the 7% of people in this country, I was one of them, the 7% of people in this country whose parents are wealthy enough to send them to the private schools now have an advantage in business, in sport, in politics, in media, in the civil service. They now have a bigger advantage than they've had at any point for the last 100 years. And whilst that's their good fortune, actually what is happening is every year, tens of thousands of our youngsters are not being given the educational opportunity that their IQ demands. And we must make sure that we are the party that campaigns to make sure that bright kids from poor backgrounds get the opportunity of selective education and the chance to reach their best in life. And we must say to Mr. Miliband, yes, Mr. Miliband, you're right about one thing. The cost of living crisis is very real in this country. For many, many millions of families, they've seen their wages compressed over the course of the last 10 years at the same time as the household bills have risen. And the reason, Mr. Miliband, that people's standard of living, people's wages have been compressed the way they have, is that we have no control over the labour market supply into this country whatsoever, and the open door to southern and eastern Europe is damaging the living standards of millions of decent British families in this country, and we will do something about it. And while we're at it, Mr. Miliband, weren't you the Energy Secretary who put into place the Climate Change Act? And weren't you, with your friends Cameron and Clegg, also hell-bent on building what I think are absolutely ugly, disgusting wind turbines all over our country? I wouldn't be better to recognise that actually the only effect of this is that by 2020 everybody will have a 20% surcharge on their electricity bills, and UKIP is the party who actually can help people with the cost of living. We would scrap all wind energy subsidies and bring down electricity prices. Anyway, that's a taste of the kind of things the UKIP manifesto is going to need to say, because the public understand where we are on Europe and immigration. They need to understand where we stand on everything else. And we will make all of this clear by publishing our outline manifesto, and we'll do it at our party conference in Doncaster, which just happens to be Ed Miliband's constituency. And we will outline, we will put out our outline manifesto at the autumn conference. And the other thing that I have to deal with is the constant, and Roger mentioned it a moment ago, but the constant accusation that UKIP is a one-man band, that it's just Nigel Farage and there isn't anybody else. Now, I personally can't understand how we've got to this point, you know, being the shy, retiring sort of person that I am. But clearly it's a bit of a problem. But what those of you in the party understand, even if the media don't understand it yet, or the British public don't fully understand it yet, is we have a wealth of new talent in this party. We really do. And I have to say, Diane, I haven't spoken to you yet today, but for you to be on live television for 3 hours the other night, on that remarkable programme, and wasn't she superb? Diane is just an example of the talent we've got in this party. So I'm going to be appointing, over the course of the next few weeks, a series of spokesmen and spokeswomen who will take over authority and control over key policy areas. They will work to make sure we get the manifesto right for the autumn conference, and when the media want people to be interviewed on those topics, it will not be me that's appearing on the radio or the television, it'll be the spokesmen and the spokeswomen. And one of the changes in UKIP that I'm proudest of is that if you look at the new crop of MEPs, you'll notice a lot of very competent women have been elected as UKIP MEPs. And this has happened. This has happened, and I'm really proud of this. This has happened without us using all-female shortlists. This has happened without us using positive discrimination, which I believe to be demeaning. This has happened on merit, and it will be a new look UKIP, and the better for that. And we have to choose our candidates for our key target seats. The seats in which we top the poll in the European election. The seats in which we've already won district or county council representation. It's absolutely the model that Paddy Ashdown's Lib Dems used during the 1990s. I wasn't for a minute suggesting that we ever supported anything the Lib Dems stood for in terms of policy, but in terms of military planning, of campaigns, they were very, very good at it, and that's the model we must choose. Not that it's done them much good now. And to see them come sixth in the Newark by-election, given that... particularly given that we're here in Eastbourne, which is a Liberal Democrat-held seat, and where the superb local UKIP committee topped the poll here in the European elections with 36% of the vote. Well done, UKIP Eastbourne. So we've got to choose our target seats, and we've got to get to work in a big way to make sure that we do hold that balance of power in Westminster next year. And I also, at the centre of the party, are going to have to look, with help and support from others, to find some new key personnel. Because whilst the new London office has been running very well, about half the office have now been elected to the European Parliament. So we have a little bit of a manpower crisis. So that's the other thing. So I'm going to have an incredibly busy summer working with Steve Crowder, the party chairman, working without Stuart Wheeler, who has now stood down as party treasurer as he approaches 80, but our thanks go to Stuart for 4 years of really decent hard work. So I have to work with a new team to find the new people. And I think in terms of where UKIP is on the political stage in this country, it would be really farcical for anybody now to consider UKIP to be others. Do you remember that? You know, even the opinion polls, how do you intend to vote? Labour, Lib Dem, Conservative, or others? We're not others, we've arrived. We are part of the political mainstream debate in this country. And we need to be treated as such. You know, every year, twice a year, there are new working peers that are created and put into the House of Lords. And the Conservatives have a quota, and Labour have a quota, and the Lib Dems have a quota, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence. You know what's coming, don't you? It won't be libelous, I'm sure. Just very close. It's no coincidence, is it, that most of those that get sent to the House of Lords appear to be quite big party donors. And there have been hundreds of them appointed over the last few years. As part of that coalition agreement, signed up to on that beautiful day in the garden of number 10, one of the things the coalition said is that they wanted the House of Lords to be reflective of the way people voted in this country. We have now won a national election. We've shown that we can get over a quarter of the vote in by-elections, regardless whether they're Conservative held, or Labour held, or Lib Dem held. And starting this morning with Lord Pearson on the Today programme, we are now going to absolutely insist that we're given a sensible, fair quota of working peers to operate for UKIP in the House of Lords. There is one more demand that I have to make, and that is on the subject of debates. And there are many people who contributed towards that success on May the 22nd. Many people, many of you who worked very hard, many of our candidates who were superb. Particular thanks has to go to Paul Sykes for putting over £1 million into our campaign. But the man that really made the election campaign for me because it was the first time in 40 years we were actually able to have a full debate on the European question on national television in this country. So Nick Clegg, on behalf of all of us in UKIP, thank you for what you did. I thought you'd like that. But that's not the end of the subject of debates, because there are going to be debates ahead of the next general election. And I think we now have to insist and demand that, given the fact we've won the last national election, that UKIP must be included in the next leaders' debates, otherwise they wouldn't be a party. I am not for one moment pretending, despite all the amazing electoral progress and success that we've made in the course of the last couple of years, I am not pretending for one moment that what we're now taking on is going to be easy. It isn't. The first past the post electoral system is absolutely brutal to a party like UKIP, because unlike the others, our support doesn't come from any one segment of society. You know, the Labour Party traditionally got the working class vote. The Conservative Party traditionally got the middle class vote. The Liberal Party, when it fell back to its roots, was a party of the Celtic fringe. The Scottish National Party, for obvious reasons, won't do that well in Eastbourne. And so all the political parties have either a socio-economic or a geographical bent. But that isn't the case, is it, with UKIP? Because in UKIP we pick up old Labour votes. In UKIP we pick up very upset Liberal Democrats. In UKIP we pick up a lot of Conservatives who don't recognise Mr Cameron to be one of them. And in UKIP, perhaps crucially and most fascinatingly, in UKIP we pick up over 20% of our vote from people who haven't voted for over 20 years or who have never voted in their lives. This is the most eclectic political array that has ever been put together before in British politics. We can be proud of that. But that doesn't make it any easier under the first past the post system to break through. It is not going to be easy. But I hope this afternoon I've outlined to you what I'm going to try and do nationally with the party, what you can do locally with the party to make this happen. And I think this earthquake that started on May the 22nd, that rumbled through Newark and will rumble on over the next few months, in district council and county council, and who knows if there are more parliamentary by-elections. We have got to keep this earthquake rumbling, and we've got to make sure that we achieve our goal, we achieve our prize, and we get Westminster MPs elected next year in May. I believe we can do it. I know we can do it, and with your support, we will change the future of political history in this country. Thank you.
Very much, Nigel. Thank you. I hope he remembers to give the headset back, because otherwise I'll be running short.
Good afternoon, Janice Atkinson. A young lady I didn't know that much about until the beginning of this campaign. Our paths had not crossed that much with her work and my previous work with the party. And I've thoroughly enjoyed working with Janice a great deal, and she is not afraid of, to her credit, the unglamorous side of politics. And there's not much glamorous work in politics. You know, yesterday I had a family, our events manager Lacey and her family up in the foyer just stuffing the conference programmes. You know, this is unglamorous work, isn't it? Trudging around in the rain delivering leaflets is unglamorous work. And Janice phones me yesterday, and this is a good reflection of the sort of woman that Janice is, and she said, "Can I help? Is there anything I can do?" And that even includes the unglamorous work of stuffing conference programmes. So here's a lady that I know that the title of MEP will definitely not affect at all. Janice Atkinson.
Good afternoon, Eastbourne. Did you enjoy your lunch, and particularly those of you who came to the MEP lunch? Good. Good. Wow. Are we still feeling the aftershocks of our earthquake? I am. I was quite shocked on election night. I thought we'd get 5, we only got 4. But anyway, that's a failure, and we can do better next time if that's all right. You see, I'm a hard taskmaster. One thing I didn't do on election night was do so many thank yous as I should have done. I thanked the electorate, I thanked the returning officer. Because actually I didn't expect to speak. I thought it would just be Nigel, and Nigel thought it would just be him to speak as well. So before I go into the main theme of my speech, I'd like to say thank you to my UKIP family, because we come under such sustained attack. And the more you come under attack, the more you come together as a cohesive group, and that's what we did. And I have never known such fantastic support from the young independents up to the pensioners, and I can't tell you how grateful I was for that, and my own family. So thank you, my UKIP family. And actually I'd like to pay tribute to one man, Nigel Farage, because actually, you know, this man, you know, has led our party. He created the debate. We were leading the debate. The others were following. And when you look at the party leaders from the Lib Lab Con, they're like pygmies. They become more like pygmies with every passing day. And Nigel towers above them. And are we going to cause an earthquake in 2015? Oh, absolutely. But my speech to you this afternoon, and particularly the media, actually, and our enemies out there, and I don't include all the media in that. I'm going to talk about homophobia, sexism, and particularly racism, which is particularly pernicious. Let's take homophobia. Why, if we're such a homophobic party, have we got our first Scottish gay MEP? And if we're so homophobic, why have we got such a thriving LGB party? LGBT party, which I fully support, and they come out and campaign with me. So let's knock that homophobic on the head. But as Nigel touched upon in his speech, if we're so sexist and misogynistic party, why have we now got 7 women MEPs? Why did I top the national ballot? I came 4th behind Nigel, Paul Nuttall and Gerard Batten. I came 4th, and the other women were hot on my heels. I was number 2 in the South East. You voted me for number 2. And the only person that stopped me being with number 1 was Nigel Farage. So, you know, the females are there, and if you think Nigel's caused a bit of an earthquake in Brussels, you wait till those females turn up. I tell you, they don't know what's here. And we had women topping the region in Yorkshire and West Midlands, and we came 2nd on the ballot. So let's knock that sexism on the head as well. But also, we got there by 1 person, 1 vote, as Nigel said earlier. No women or women shortlist for us, no gender quotas, and I thank you for that. We should be proud of that too. I particularly want to tackle racism. As a teenager, I went on Rock Against Racism, and I was part of the Anti-Nazi League. That's what I did. My views have never changed, and I challenged them. And this has been the dirtiest, nasty election that we've known, because they've used racism and they've thrown the racism card at us. And in some ways, racism is the nastiest of all the isms. If you're against uncontrolled immigration, then that's racist, but we all know it isn't. And now Labour are admitting that they got immigration wrong, but nobody is calling the racist card for them. And I'll go on to that in a minute. Now, I took Hope Not Hate and United Against Fascism on, and I took them on at the same time as Nigel. Actually, we didn't discuss it. And I can tell you, my Twitter account just came under attack, and those that you follow me on Twitter will know that some of the hateful things that were said against me. You know, there was one I was going to repeat about an abortion, but I'm not going to repeat that because it's so disgusting. I've had death threats, I've been called a Nazi slut, but I took them on. It was really, really nasty. But you know, those people, they're funded by the unions. And every one of you in this audience, and I've been a trade union member, do they realise where their money's going? Do they realise that the hate that's been spouted against us and all the anti-messages that went out in Newark, like we're going to scrap maternity pay and privatise the NHS, all that was GMB and Unite funded. And we've got to take that message out there. We've got to tell them they're wrong. We've got to appeal to the ordinary trade unions. Do you realise that your money is actually being used as a racism campaign against us? And I think, you know, if you're a trade union member, you'd be absolutely disgusted with that. There is method in what they do, because actually they targeted us because those groups were paid to do it. They were paid by the Department of Communities and Local Government. They received tens of thousands of pounds and they used that money against us. They were funded by the unions and they were funded by Labour. And yet, what do you do when you form a pressure group and you've got funding? You actually campaign against people, and their campaign was targeted against us. I mean, some of you may have seen me across Twitter and in the newspapers where I raised my middle finger in Ashford a few weeks ago. I'm not proud of that, but I was pushed to the limits of my endurance. We've had a nasty, horrible, sustained attack against us. And I was standing with some lovely, distinguished elderly gentlemen and our ladies and our youth wing in Ashford a few weeks ago on a nice sunny day. And 5 rabble turned up against us. And they had racist bigots, and I was called a Nazi slut. And they're standing there dancing in the sunshine because there was a sort of born-again religious group that was playing music. And they thought it was okay to stand there with their placards and say this. So we did a bit of research against them, and they were Greens. The Socialist Workers' Party wing of the Greens. Now, they're standing for election. If they'd have knocked on the doors of the electorate, rather than hassling my people and calling us racist bigots and Nazi sluts, if they'd knocked on the doors and they told the people, one was an eco-socialist, whatever that is, One was a self-proclaimed witch that was into exorcism. They couldn't make it up, she was, absolutely. And one was an anarchist. It's true. Our youth wing quickly, I mean, Twitter's a wonderful thing, they quickly went online. They said, Janice, these are the people that are up against you. But they think they're legitimate to stand there in the street and campaign against lovely Norman sitting down there and me. And I just lost my rag. So I apologise that if I brought the party slightly into disrepute, but you know, it was the end of a long and bitter and nasty campaign. And because of all the reasons that I've said to you about, you know, my background, again, you know, going on Rock Against Racism and being part of the Anti-Nazi League, I particularly saw red that day. It's not from I see red. To ask why these people have such loud voices is because they are actually professionally funded. Successive governments have created something called the hate industry. So you've got the human rights industry, the racism industry, and the equality rights industry. If they were abolished, saving millions of taxpayers' funds, and lawyers and barristers would be out of work, saving on lawyers' fees, and then scapegoating people, our country would be a much more harmonious place. But don't take it from me, I'm going to introduce you to two people now that helped me in my campaign in Kent. They felt so inspired, they were so angry against the racism slurs. And they're going to touch on some of these issues I've talked about. So we're going to hear first from Ben from the Medway Towns, and we've got a short video because Ben can't be with us today.
You're 20 years old, you're British, you're a student at uni. Yeah. How do you see your political options as a young man?
Oh wow. I think the only political options I think are worth considering is Respect Party, Green Party and UKIP. I think they're the only political options.
Which party do you support in the European elections?
That's what UKIP.
What was your primary reason for doing that?
Well, I think I don't know whether it's down to bravery or stupidity, but whatever it is, they seem to be the only ones who are really committed to and will be able to deliver either a referendum or a straight out of Europe, which I think is really what we're dying in. So.
What's your main reasons for wanting out of Europe?
Well, I've heard there's statistics that say I think it's 55 million we send to Europe a day, and I in my life, I've never really received anything directly from the European Union. So I think we're paying a lot of bureaucracy, and I don't think it's paying off. If they were doing something for the particular country that we live in, outside of London, it'd be great, but I don't think they are. I can't see anything.
That's a fairly controversial position to take as a student, is it not?
I think you'd be surprised. A lot of students actually are very my class anyway, are quite not very politically motivated, but they've got strong opinions about stuff. It's just they feel like they can't do anything. Because I mean, we all got rallied up behind Nick Clegg, and then they lied to us. So after a lot of the students, like that's what they put all their hearts into the Liberal Democrat movement, and then because they turned out to be just the same as the rest of them, you know, that was heartbreaking for the students. So I think that's why a lot of students, even though they've got beliefs, they don't really trust anybody. So there's no point getting involved.
UKIP's taken a hammering over the last few weeks, particularly about being a racist party. What's your perception on that?
I don't know, I think when you're comparing, I think people have to be very careful when they use the phrase racist party. It's not like it's BNP or the National Front. Those were properly racist parties. I don't think you can define UKIP as a racist party. I mean, does that mean it's all its members are racist? I mean, it can't really control the ideology of those members. And that's like anybody, really. But I think if I was to make a case, or if I was to make a case against UKIP as a racist, to convict them as a racist party, I think I'd have a very hard time doing so, because none of their policy have anything to do with race. It just seems to be with immigration, but it seems like immigration is the buzzword for race nowadays, which is incompetent.
UKIP's now released its manifesto. Will you continue to track UKIP as we move towards the general election?
Yeah, I actually read the manifesto yesterday, and there's a lot. I don't know, I expected it to be a lot wilder than it was. I really did expect it to be a bit more. I don't know, they just have this, because it's a new party, it has this, it's not that it's necessarily unprofessional, but it's not as institutionalised as the party, so you think it's going to be, oh, it makes a manifesto in the party, right? But it's actually really well written, it's very informative, very short. And there's key points on there which I really, really liked, and they sound great. If they can pull it off, which I hope they will, then I think that would be great.
What would your message be to your group, your fellow students?
I don't know, but with us, I think we just really need to, as people who are in power now, they kind of need to know that we're here, and yes, we do care about the country. No, they can't continue to lie. You know, if I got to power back first things, and we wouldn't need any other parties, would you? Because the Labour would be alright, wouldn't they? And the Conservatives would be alright because they promised something, they have to do it. You know? So, like, I think, yeah, if really, to my generation, I'm saying we should just get involved in politics. Either we need to start a political party, we need to join a political party, we need to leave the country if we're not voting, or we need to start a revolution. There are options.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased that he's decided to support us, because it wasn't just a shoe-in. You know, I was interviewed whether he was going to come over to UKIP or not. You know, it was a real hard taskmaster. But I'm hoping that Ben, if he'll have us, will be a youth ambassador for us, and particularly in Kent, because he's at university there, and I think that would be really great. Next week they hear from my friend Sat from Rochester in Kent, and he's going to tell you his tale.
Thank you very much, Janice. Hi, my name is Satpal Singh. I'm a British Sikh from Rochester in Kent. Before anything, I'd just like to announce, I'm very pleased to announce that I'm actually about to be a father very soon. Thank you. I more or less left school and college with, I'd say, a fairly basic education. Worked in a few jobs, B&Q, and a few giant companies, and then eventually started my own business in the washroom and hygiene sector. We supply hand dryers and all sorts of workplace equipment. Now, I would say in the last 5 years, it's got so difficult to compete. And I would say I've noticed that these giant companies are more or less somehow buying all these smaller companies, sometimes still trading as they are, but behind the scenes, sort of interchanging staff, getting rid of staff, saving money somehow. But it's not giving people like us a chance. It's by far the most difficult year I've seen in the last, well, this last year, to be honest with you. I just feel this corporatism and globalisation, where will it end? I'd like to tell you how I actually got here today. If even 5 weeks ago anybody told me that I'd be doing a speech in front of the most racist party in politics, but you know what? It's thanks to somebody who more or less pestered me 2 years ago. He kept saying, you've got to come to this UKIP meeting, you've got to come to this UKIP meeting. And I thought, at the time, what am I going to do at a UKIP meeting? And in the end, more or less 4 or 5 months ago, I went to Maidstone High Street, where he took me. I met up with Janice Atkinson and some other council candidates, and it really, something I felt that day, because I saw people coming up to us, even though I was just standing there with them. They had concerns. They were worried about their communities, what's going to happen down the road from us, worried about their jobs. And you know what, that's where I felt it's happening everywhere. They mentioned getting an appointment with the doctor's surgery. Now I can relate to that, it's exactly the same. I've known some receptionists for years and years, and those same receptionists have turned me down so many times, and I think it's strange, they don't want to do it, but they're having to do it. Things are stretched. The primary schools I went to, which more or less gave me my British way of life, are now unable to cope. So where does that leave my children and my child that very soon will enter this world? As I said, I am very worried about my country, very, very worried about my British way of life. Unemployment is another big issue, and it just worries me to where am I going to be sending my children, and some of the very, very difficult decisions that I'm going to be making. And let's tackle racism. Now, I remember being at school, and you know, I'd have all the basic name calling, they'd call me Packy, I'd call him Righty. And with some of these playground banters, some of them ended up some of my best friends. But I can understand where political correctness is coming from. It's a good idea, it's a good theory they come up with. But where will that end? I remember, I just want to take you back to the London rally of hate racism that John took me to, a friend of mine. And then we were queuing up. Some of you may remember this. And all I can remember is people shouting, UKIP is a racist party. And I looked at some of these people in the eye. And I thought, this is they didn't mean it. It's like they're throwing something at us that isn't true. I saw through it, and I know many, many other Sikhs, Muslims, people of colour will see through it eventually, because the truth really always wins in the end. I'm very proud to be part of UKIP. I'm very proud of my party, I'm very proud of Nigel Farage. Very proud that we're actually exposing the truth, we're sticking up for the truth. And we're going to make such beautiful changes and really bring our sovereignty back. And just to end it, just like many of you here, I think it's time to bring our country back.
They're great, aren't they? But there's loads more of those, people like them, in the Medway towns, as we discovered when we were there in Chatham and Gillingham that morning. Yeah, more classes, all backgrounds, all demographics and all colours voted for us. And when you're going to see a bit of a heat map later on about where we got our maximum votes from, and it was the areas in Kent where actually we've had high immigration over decades. You know, the Sikhs that came here to work, the Afro-Caribbeans, and they voted for us. And that's a really inconvenient truth to the other parties. Onwards, colleagues, there's no time to rest. You have your fun today because we're going to get this People's Army on the march to 2015, and I want a seat in Kent and be an MP because I don't want to be an MEP. Okay?
Oh, I enjoyed that. I need a few tissues. That was fantastic. Right. Our next speaker isn't on stage, but will be very soon. It's not been an easy task organising this conference because my priority has been to get that young lady elected over there, Diane elected, and our next speaker elected. Ordinarily, our next speaker would be an excellent partner in crime in helping me organise the regional conference. So, to some degree, I feel like I've lost one arm, I feel like I've lost a colleague, but we in the South East have gained a fourth UKIP MEP, ladies and gentlemen, Ray Finch.
Hello. Are we all having fun? Yeah. Bloody right. Rob, thank you so much, and thank you for everything you've done with this conference. It's been fabulous, and everyone's had a wonderful time. And on behalf of everyone here, I thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were to look in your programme, you'll see I'm due to be speaking on being UKIP group leader on Hampshire County Council. I resigned as group leader about a week ago. So I'm not going to talk about that. I've left it in far more capable hands because frankly I want to do every job I do for UKIP and for our country to the best of my ability. And I can combine being a councillor and being an MEP. So I forgave the other job. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about something else. I like doing this to Rob because he always worries I'm going to come out with something on stage. And I just like giving him a few extra grey hairs because he hasn't got as many as me. I'm going to talk about the plan. This is my plan. Now I'm an MEP. My plan, it's not going to be the MEP with the most questions in the Parliament or the one who's on the most committees. My plan is to be the MEP who does the most to get UKIP MPs in the only Parliament that really matters in Westminster. I'm going to do that by making myself available to every one of you, to all of the branches and all of the counties, to help with fundraising and supporting our parliamentary candidates. I'm going to make sure every branch in the South East and further beyond has my number and can get in touch with me so that I can help with publicity on issues for their councillors or PPCs, anything that they're working on. You know, the fact is, having those three letters after my name doesn't make me a better person, doesn't make me a more important person. What it means is I can walk through doors that previously Ray Finch, that lout from Havant, couldn't get through. So it makes a difference, and I want to lever that. I want to use that as leverage so that we can get the most value out of all of the hard work that we've done. You know, we got 750,000 votes just in the South East in the European elections. That's fabulous. And none of our MEPs, I know in the South East, will forget that. And none of them will forget that it's your work and your votes that made it happen. We are standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm just crying again. I'm a big girl, aren't I? I only normally cry like this when I see how much money my missus has taken out the bank. I'm going to speak at every public meeting to which I'm invited, to which I can possibly go, and I challenge every single one of my MEP colleagues to beat my number of public meetings, because it is a competition. It's a competition to see who most deserves your hard work and your votes, and we're going to all fight as hard as we can for you. It's not about being over in Brussels and Strasbourg and sitting there pressing buttons like the other button pressing monkeys. We believe in Britain, and we'll be working in Britain to make our country once again our own. For those of you who are reasonably local or have dealt with me before, you know I work normally from the Leominster office as Nigel's office manager. He's sacking me from that job. I need the money as well. However, we shall still be working from Leominster. I've spoken to John and Julia Longhurst, who are the people who kindly donate the office to us, and to whom I'd like you to all applaud. They are here. And we will be making that office bigger and better. And I would like every single branch member locally, if they can, to offer to come and help, because we will be welcoming as many volunteers as possible, because we have a huge year ahead of us. It's possibly the most crucial year we've had since the end of the Second World War. It really is like that, because this is our bridgehead. These 24 MEPs we have, they're our bridgehead into getting MPs from UKIP into Westminster. And believe you me, there is no other way that we will ever leave the EU without having UKIP MPs in Westminster. So, my plan, which I'm sure all my colleagues buy into, is we're going to make the South East the leading region in the general election campaign. We've already heard that we're going to have target seats across the country and specifically across the South East. And I'll help anyone, anywhere, anytime, with all of my time and all of my energy to help make that breakthrough, so that we get people like Chris Adams into Westminster. People who believe. And of course, Janice had just got to looking at me. People who believe in our country, who believe in our future, and who will do a fabulous job, rather than, you know, these jumped up fools that we've got at present. Shakespeare once wrote in Julius Caesar, Brutus speaking. It's rather worrying when someone calls themselves Brutus, isn't it? Anyone who knows Shakespeare. There's a tide in the affairs of man, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what's ahead of us now. Those of you who've seen me in the last couple of hours have known I've been running around trying to write my speech, because I changed my mind over what I was going to do, and I've actually run out of bits I've written, so I'll finish in a minute. But let me just tell you now, as I've reiterated all through this campaign, and as I've always said, you know, this is our time, this is our future. You know, it's not just for you and I in this room, it's for our children, for our grandchildren. And it's not just for them, it's for our forefathers. And we're remembering D-Day. Those people endured incredible hardships. They fought and died. to keep our country what it is. We would be failing in our duties as Britons if we refused to accept the challenge, if we refused to say, this is our country, we want it back, and we want to make Britain great again. Thank you very much.
I hope you agree that we've put together an afternoon that's just as strong as the morning that gave you a reason to desert your cornettos in the beach. It's great stuff thus far. I must give credit to Ray and the other elected MEPs for their conduct actually during the campaign. I know that might sound odd, but the role as me as campaign manager over the last 8 months has basically been to be the person that says, I need you to do this, do that, go here, drive there, and Ray's just one of the many candidates who have just accepted my bossiness. But thank you, because you did it without question or complaint. Now, I don't know how many, who here has met David Cameron? Just put up your arm if you have. See, not many, yeah. Likewise, yeah, I've only met him once. It was when I was working in my role as a radio journalist. And the only thing I can say about it is that he seems to love it, right? And it is being Prime Minister. And when it was all rather incestuous because it was in my local constituency. I was freelancing for a local radio station while being a UKIP candidate. And David Cameron was coming to my constituency, and they wanted to have someone in there and interview the chap, and so I interviewed Dave, and the interview consisted of one question, one answer, and no further questions. Anyway, so I've met David Cameron, and obviously I don't think much of him because I'm speaking here at a UKIP conference and working for our leader. And so it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who, unlike me, just asking David Cameron one question, our next speaker has really been taking the fight to Cameron. Every campaign I manage, I meet new people in the party, and Jason Kent, our chairman of UKIP in Oxfordshire, was one person who I hadn't met previously. And young, dynamic young man who was going to wave a magic wand over Oxfordshire, and certainly did. The increase in activism, the enthusiasm in members in Oxfordshire, and this is important because it's David Cameron's county, for now. And I remember from the memories of the campaign, I remember that he wanted 50,000 leaflets delivered. Not a problem. 50k, sent 50,000 leaflets up to Oxfordshire. A few days later, Rob, I think I may have underestimated the enthusiasm of my members, and asking me for more leaflets. So to listen, to hear more now about taking the fight to Cameron, our Oxfordshire chairman, Jason Kent.
Thank you, everyone. Janice has already mentioned this slide, so I'm only going to show it for a brief moment. Oxfordshire is the most northwesterly point of our southeast region. I have no science. Oh dear. Maybe? We believe you. Well, while still waiting for my slides. There we go. So we are the top right corner. And just to set the scene a little, if you're not familiar with Oxfordshire, we have 6 parliamentary constituencies and 5 branches, branches associations, I'll say branches, let's change it. We have Banbury in the north, and a year ago, we didn't have a branch actually in Henley. So after the county elections this time last year, we'd done the county elections without actually having a functioning branch down in Henley. Since then, we now have a fully functioning branch, and the position that I have as Oxfordshire Chairman. Sorry. So the position I have as Oxfordshire Chairman only came about in the autumn of last year. We have really gelled together as a county. I'm immensely proud of all the chairmen, all the branches, and the activism that they have shown. And as Rob has said, I'm here to say, taking the fight to Cameron, and we really have taken the fight to Cameron. He is in the Whitney constituency, as some of you may know. So far, we've also selected 4 of our PPCs for next year's elections as well. We have 2 left to go. One of them is the Whitney constituency, and the other is the Oxford, West and Abingdon. If I just show you for Oxford, West and Abingdon, it's the one on yellow on the left there. That was won by the Tories, because we are a seared blue around a little dot of red in Oxford City. That was won from the Lib Dems, who had had it since 97, by 170 votes, just 170 votes, 3 recounts. That one is going to be a very interesting seat come next year. At the same time as the Euro elections, in Oxfordshire we also had 3 areas contesting their local elections. In the north of the county, up in Banbury, they had a full slate out of 16 candidates, which was brilliant. And in Whitney, the district council was just running about 16, 17 seats. We put out the most we've ever done there before. That was 11 candidates standing. And we had also Oxford City as well. So Oxfordshire this year, as Rob said about the leaflets, if we counted all the ones that were printed for the various candidates, the delivery was somewhere in the region of 120,000 leaflets throughout the county. We managed to put on 2 of the public meetings. One of them was in Banbury, one was in Whitney. The one in Whitney I chaired, and we had Roger Helena and Simon Strutt there. It was quite interesting to watch. As I was sat there chairing this meeting, I could see out the corner of my eye, because there's a big glass side to the room, there was this person walking by, this young guy, and he was on his phone the whole time. And every now and again he'd go... I found out later he was one of the young Tories who had been sent to spy. This was a public meeting. He could have come in. And as it happens, 4 or 5 of the local councillors, Tory councillors, were in. One of them had recently become an independent, and he walked out with 2 UKIP estate agent boards to hang up at home. But I must tell you about the posters. Taking the fight to Cameron, we decided we would do posters. Now, I know there was a little bit of an issue with posters this year, but we managed, through Chris Adams, to secure quite a lot. And we used them, we think, quite wisely. One weekend in April, one of the crews went out, van, cutting equipment, drills, hammers, everything to put up signs. We put up over 30 posters throughout Oxfordshire and nearly 100 estate agent boards. And we decided we would concentrate as many as we could in Whitney. And there is one, because we're kindly souls. I'm sorry it's so blurred, but the point here is this is the main A40, this is the artery road into Whitney. When you're coming from London, back to Whitney, that is the first thing you see when you go into the Whitney constituency. There is another sign on the opposite side as the last thing you see. Just to remind our man where he is. We went a step further. This particular sign is my favourite. This one is just outside a little village called Helena, where a certain Prime Minister lives nearby. This went up on this Saturday in April, and on the Monday morning I'm doing my day job. By mid-morning I've received not 1, not 2, but 3 phone calls from the County Council and the District Council. Mr. Kent, you must remove this sign. Why? It's on the highways. No, it's not. It's on private land. Well, it's got to be on private land with the owner's permission. It is. Prove it? What? You have to prove it. This went on and they phoned back and they said, okay, we're sending out an enforcement officer, or we have sent out an enforcement officer. There is the enforcement officer's photographs. And when I had the afternoon phone sessions with them, I said, okay, is this on new wood or old wood? And they said to me, it's on new wood, obviously newly put up. Actually, it isn't. It's on a metal frame, I pointed out. From your own photographs, on a metal rusty frame. It used to be a Tory poster site. But they wouldn't give up. So I said to them, this is from your own enforcement officer. Look at the timestamp in the lower right corner, 9:35. We put the posters up on Saturday, your office opens on Monday at 9 o'clock. And you have an enforcement officer there at 9:35. You can't get the emergency services that fast. Then it started to get nasty. Yes, they demonstrated an awful lot more of the hate than the hope. Well, we left quite a lot of these up because we thought they actually said a lot more about the people who defaced them than they did about us. But back to our one near the village of Hay. That particular one was taken down and thrown in a ditch 2 to 3 times every week, and eventually we actually replaced it 4 times over the 5-week period. I don't know if any of you are aware, there's also a Facebook site my 14-year-old daughter pointed out to me that was for registering UKIP posters and having them defaced. Now, we don't know who did it. Was it these folks? Was it the tourists? We don't know. But this particular one, they left their calling card. Look at the bottom. And we put in the appropriate phone call to the party involved, and the smaller posters were taken down. But when we did our clearance last weekend or the weekend before, moving all down, we realised that the Labour ones had just been thrown into the stream. Just behind that sign, 6 foot down, there's a stream. They'd just been held in there. Now, you'd think that that would be it. The election's over, we'll move on. But this is Whitney. Oh no. This was last weekend. It's on a listed barn in the middle of the town. And so we get the phone call, why have UKIP done this? This is the local press. Why have UKIP put this up? And I said, well, think about this. Just a few weeks ago, you're trying to give us the narrative that we're a bunch of racist retired colonels. That is not the demographic of the spray camera. And surprisingly, the write-up in the Oxford Mail has quotes from Labour and from the Lib Dems and nothing from UKIP. We did, however, get rid of it, but it wasn't, as I assure you. So how did we do in Oxfordshire? Well, where we stood in Charwell, in all the wards, we came second in 9 out of the 16 wards. In West Oxfordshire, I was there at the verification, and we looked very close in some of the places. When the postal votes arrived the next day, it seemed to get very different. But one of our wards, in particular, South Whitney, we were 150 votes short of winning, which was a great shame. We would love to have got that one and actually have our first student council in Oxfordshire. Oxford City is always going to be a challenge for us, and I speak, there's a fantastic chairman, Ian MacDonald, there, and I say, you really do have the tough place to be. It's very Labour with the students at one side, you've got lots of academics, lecturers, it's very Liberal on the other side, but take heart, look what happened in Rotherham. For the European elections, we were a close second, almost everywhere, apart from the city. And in 3 of the areas, if you stacked up the Labour vote and the Lib Dems together, it didn't reach the UKIP vote. So I know Roger Bird is coming on with the road to Westminster later, but just some of the lessons that we learnt. One is build the local intelligence. We are still trying to build that local intelligence. The Tories in South Whitney realised how well we were actually doing with full canvassing and everything else. In the last 48 hours, they were bussing people in, not on the scale of Newark, but they were still bussing people in to try and get their vote back up. We had them rattled in their own home patch. And so what we're intending to do is start the canvassing, if we can call it that, knocking on doors. We need to know behind which doors our UKIP vote lies. We want to know that now, ready for next year. That's work throughout this summer and through the autumn. We want to know where the votes are. The other parties have been on the ground for many, many years. We need to learn the same things. Poster frames. We're going to do it all again. But this time, we've actually, what's been out canvassing, we've also said, you know, are you going to be a poster site? And we've got quite a few more. So we're going to have to put the frames up beforehand. We learned that putting frames up during an election campaign is a very time-consuming thing to do. So we'll put those up during this summer and through the autumn, ready for next year, to be prepared for next year. We're also going to try and plan our reaction to the postal votes a lot better than we did this year. And last but not least, having got 4 of the 6, and hopefully the full 6 parliamentary candidates in a few months' time, we want them out and about, meeting people and getting known and in the media. So that's our plan for Oxfordshire, that's what we've done, and we really did take the fight to Cameron this year. Whilst I still have the platform, I do want to say something that's not directly about Oxfordshire. There are 2 people in this room who have worked their socks off throughout this campaign, and they have been hugely supportive of both our branches and me for the county. One is Rob Burberry, the other Chris Adams.
Well, I hope I've kept you in some safe hands this afternoon. I'm going to introduce our next speaker and hand you back to your chairman of the morning. Somebody who, and this is not a fact that we, well, let's face it, we've all done terribly well, and we're all appreciative of each other, aren't we? I've got to say. Roger Bird is somebody who is available nearly as much as the leader, actually, in as far as when I can get hold of him. Always provides good counsel, something which is really helpful and needed in this sort of position. Roger, I'm very grateful to you over the last few months. Former chairman of the South East region, but good counsellor to me. Thank you, Roger Bird.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much, and for all your work, obviously, in the campaign. I'm sorry to have missed a couple of the speeches this afternoon. I had another engagement I had to go to briefly, so I missed part of what Ray had said, and what Janice and their colleagues were saying. Did any of them talk about horses at all? No? Any of them mention what happened yesterday at Epsom Downs in Surrey, in the 220? Yes? A few people know. Well, there was a horse in the 220 at Epsom Downs called Farage. Spelled differently, so it may not be a direct descendant. And the horse won with odds of 16 to 1. If you're ever looking out for a good place to start your branch fundraising effort, find out where it's running next. Also, I was told just now outside by the local newsagent that there were a few people who turned up today without tickets in order to start a demonstration, because there'd been the wink had been tipped amongst the locals who were into that sort of thing to turn up and start a demonstration. And sure enough, 4 people did turn up. So, you know, they did their best. They haven't quite outnumbered us today, I'm glad to say. So it just goes to show we are still on the march, very much. Now, I haven't talked much about myself up till now, because I see myself very much as the supporting act in all of this.
Roger, speak up, please.
Now, I recognise there the voice of John Moran, because he's the only person that can successfully heckle from the other side of a hall of 600 people. So, nice to see you, John. So, I don't tend to talk about myself much on these occasions, but I've spent the last 2 years as chief volunteer, as I like to describe it, in the South East. So, not directly running any of the branches, nobody's actual boss. I'm here to help candidates, to facilitate things, to help branches with problems, to help advise people like Rob Burberry. I've been involved in a lot of election campaigns over the years. I was adding it up the other day. So something over 70 different election campaigns of one kind or another in the course of more than 20 years. So I've seen a good few things and can provide a bit of advice with that. But I quite enjoy providing support to those of you who are in the front line as candidates. I've done that myself. I've been a local councillor, and I've stood 3 times for UKIP in local elections as well, scoring 28% on 2 of those occasions. I didn't quite win, but there you go. But who am I? Why am I here exactly? Well, I'm one of those people that Nigel really hates because I'm an Oxford PPEist. I'm one of those terrible people who study philosophy, politics and economics, but I'm not one of those who thinks that purely as a result of that they can therefore run the country and tell everybody else what to think. I'm a bit more humble about my role in things. So I've served for 2 years as chairman of the South East region for UKIP. I've served as chairman of UKIP Surrey. I've been down at the grassroots, an activist, a canvasser, a deliverer, and everything else, as we all have. I've been a councillor in Wandsworth. I've been a trustee of a charity. I've worked for some years as finance director of a group of education companies in the private sector. I've been a university lecturer. I've trained as a chartered accountant and been an auditor. I've been company secretary of the PLC, and I've done brief stints years ago at the Bank of England, Conservative Central Office, insurance broking, and also at Car magazine. And my first ever job was singing on the West End stage. We often think that these days too many politicians have never had a proper job. At least you've got a wide selection there of ones that you can pick from as to what is a proper job and what isn't. So whatever it is. So what have I done as the South East chairman? Hopefully you will have seen me more behind the scenes helping with things, so that those of you who've been the candidates, whether at European level, Police and Crime Commission elections, whatever, can be at the front, leading the vanguard, and the people who are seen in the media most for UKIP. But I've been there behind the scenes. One of my contributions, which I can now talk about, is the process for the selection of European election candidates, which has clearly been very successful in terms of who we've managed to get elected. Well, the system that the NEC adopted 18 months ago is largely the system which I designed for them. And I hope that it worked well, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, it's my fault. So that's been one of my contributions. But sometimes I wonder if I stay too much in the background. I'll give you an example of that. Last year, at the conference, just like this one, the one we held in Frimley, when I was up here on the stage all day introducing the speakers, but I didn't actually give a speech myself. Well, we had a new member from London who came along to that conference, not from the South East region, but simply because she'd only recently joined UKIP, and that was the first event that was going on in the area, so she came along and dutifully made notes on everything that people had said, and who they were, and what was going on, and impressions of it. She had no recollection of seeing me or anything I'd said or done the whole day, even though I'd been up there on the stage throughout introducing people. And even now that she's my girlfriend, I don't hold it against her. The lady in question, you may have seen more recently speaking out on UKIP's behalf, Suzanne Evans. On my bet, I I won my bet. I told her she'd get a bigger round of applause than me. So, yeah, there it is. Of course, she does outstanding work for us, and like me, she's a former councillor in London herself. She's much more front office, whereas I like to help people behind the scenes. I said to her recently, when it comes to presentation, she is the smile, I am the teeth. It's a fair description, I think, for those of you who know me well, anyway. So what has been achieved in that time? Well, obviously, in the last couple of years, we've been winning council seats in areas where we often hadn't expected to win council seats. Many of you here today, and I know some of you very well, have been successful in areas that the Conservatives in particular like to take for granted throughout the South East. And you know, voters never like being taken for granted. You know how when people canvass, Conservatives knocking on the door often say, "Hello, I'm calling from so-and-so. Can I count on your support?" Well, no, you can't. You can't count on anything. You have to persuade me. If we go and knock on people's doors, we say, "Hello, would you consider voting UKIP?" Or "I'm local. Can I interest you in UKIP?" But we don't take it as read that they're automatically going to support us. So we've been winning throughout the South East council seats by the dozen all across the area, and for me as a former councillor, I think that's very important. As Nigel's already said, it's those clusters of councillors which are an essential building block for us in making sure we can now go on to win parliamentary seats all across the region as well. Now, he attributed this to Paddy Ashdown as a technique. I must say this is one area where I would disagree with him, because the technique is a bit older than that. Paddy Ashdown and his acolytes did use that successfully. But really, it's in the old-fashioned Liberal tradition. Some of you here will remember David Penhaligon from Cornwall, or Michael Meadowcroft from Leeds, or John Smithson, who's written on the subject. These are all Liberal Party activists, MPs or writers who have pioneered what they called community politics, and sometimes dismissed as pavement politics. But really, all politics is local, as the saying goes. You have to have those grassroots, those key building blocks, start with the local community and build upwards. If you just have a top-down party, as the Conservatives are now, as the SDP was when it was founded, or just a party of big interests, like the Labour Party has always been, and has made no secret of, then you're not really in touch with what's going on. And that's another reason why I like a party like UKIP, because we are in touch with those grassroots and with those communities. Now, we're going to hear a lot and read a lot in the press about target seats for next year for Westminster. Well, it's not exactly news that there will be target seats. I don't know that we're actually going to be announcing such a list. In many ways, I think it's beneficial to try and keep the enemy guessing. It's not going to be for want of thinking or analysis. We do study these things in some detail. There are people here from all across the region, and I promise you that whatever constituency you live in, from any of the 84 in the South East, I bet I know some of the principal population centres in your area, some of the councillors, what the boundary changes were, who your MP was, what the majority was, who was the previous MP and the one before that. All of these things and all the demographics, and all this goes into the mix. So whatever the selection is, it won't be random, and what's more, you'll all be very much involved in it, because when this campaign kicks off, we're going to need everybody doing whatever we all can. It's not only Westminster as well. We mustn't forget that if we look a year further out from there are the elections for the London Assembly in 2016 and for the devolved assemblies in Scotland and Wales, which have been pushed back to 2016, those elections. And it's important that we make progress there as well. Just as this year we proved that UKIP can win not just in London but in Scotland and Wales as well at European level, we want to make sure that we can prove that UKIP can win in all these areas, in the devolved assemblies as well, and prove that UKIP is the only truly national party that there is in Britain. As Nigel pointed out, the other parties don't need to target so much because they have their little pockets of support. The Conservatives, historically at least, have been strong here in our South East region. Labour in the north and Scotland, etc., etc. So they haven't needed to target because they knew that whatever they did, they couldn't really appeal to the people who didn't vote for them already. Well, we have no such glass ceiling on our vote. We've proved this year that we can win in all sorts of areas where people didn't think we could. And we're going to confound expectations again next year. And we're going to keep on confounding expectations for as long as the political class and the media keep underestimating us. See, they don't believe that we can do this. They don't believe that we're here to stay, but they just don't think that we have the critical mass to take on those deep vested interests on our own and unaided. You see, the Labour Party, when they were formed, and they started winning parliamentary seats at the beginning of the 20th century, people often forget now, the Labour Party in those years had pacts with the Liberal Party. They wouldn't have won those seats if they did not have those pacts. So people like to assume, just as with the SDP and the Liberal Party in the 80s, oh, well, UKIP must have a pact, and it must be with the Conservatives. Well, no. We don't need them. We don't need a pact to win. We've already proved that. And there's more. We want to make sure that there's a UKIP name on every ballot paper that the voters can pick, because if we're not there, they'll notice that we're absent. It's not our job to help the Conservative Party to win elections. If they can't do it on their own, we're not going to help them. Now, things are a little more complicated than that, because of course, when it comes to what we do once we've been elected, as people are finding out now in councils, sometimes negotiations make strange bedfellows, and at council level, if we want to stop a road scheme or a planning development, or try and stop cuts in social services, as Chris Wood was saying, well, sometimes we need support from the other parties as well. If we don't have a majority on a council, then we need politicians of other parties to vote for some of the proposals we're putting forward. It's only natural to try to build those sorts of alliances to get the things we need. And that's as true of getting a referendum to leave the EU as it is for anything else. So that's another matter. But electoral pacts is just a way of cheating the electorate. And that's never been UKIP's way. I've spent a lot of my time in the last 2 years trying to encourage people to stand as candidate, not to dissuade them and try to stand down in favour of somebody else who's never subscribed to UKIP's views or UKIP's policy or UKIP as a party. And I hope that the future will hold much the same for us. But what can we do in detail? What does the path to Westminster actually involve? Well, in a moment we're going to be hearing more about what can be done at detail level, out in the branches and out at county level. But just a few pointers for you as someone who's fought a lot of elections and who's helped other people to fight a lot of elections. Well, as Jason was saying just now, plan early. It isn't just about building the frames for the boards which are going up. Plan early in all sorts of ways. Start by selecting your candidates early, not just parliamentary ones, but those of you with council elections as well. Get your council candidates all in place as well. And when you do that, very important, make sure you check them. Because I promise you this, if we don't check them, somebody else that we don't like so much will check them for us, and we'll read all about it on in the press, on the news, etc. So, without having to be suspicious of people who've been in your branch, perhaps with neighbours and friends, at any rate, do just check that there isn't more to them than meets the eye. Just check the people you think you know really are all they seem, and then hopefully we can have the best possible slates of UKIP candidates, and then that way they'll be the best councillors when they do get elected. So that's the first thing. Plan now and do these things early. It's no good if we leave this till a month or two before the election or days before nominations close, because then we're doing things in a panic. A favourite example of mine, which I like to quote, is about postal vote letters. Now, as we all know, postal voters turn out to vote in roughly twice the proportion as non-postal voters. So in a council election, about 2/3 of postal voters will vote, but only about 1/3 of other people. So, given that in most wards postal voters will average perhaps 20% of the electorate, it could be anything from 10 to 30, but roughly 20% on average, you've got a small segment there of the electorate who you know is politically switched on. They follow these things, or they're interested in their community. At any rate, they interface to some degree with politicians and their message. And those are the people that we need to concentrate on speaking to particularly, as well as everyone else. So what can we do? Well, one thing we can do is we can write to them. Well, many of you are thinking, well, we do that, of course. We write to them during the campaign. Okay, but Putting together postal vote letters takes time. The way I do them, I mail merge them, so the computer churns out printed postal vote letters, each individually addressed off the electoral register, and I sign individually every single one. Last year in the county council election, that means I signed 1,800 postal vote letters and folded them myself and put them in the envelopes, the window envelopes. And fortunately, I had a very good team of people in Leatherhead and throughout Mill Valley who helped me deliver those to their recipients. Otherwise, that would have been a bit of a struggle. But you see, the point is, you can do all of this well before the election. You don't have to wait until you're about to send the letters out. 3 months before the election, you know who your council candidate will be in that ward. You know who the postal voters are. You know what your message is. You know what you want to say to them. What's stopping you from getting the envelopes 3 months before nominations and putting them all together then? You don't have to deliver them until the election is actually going on and get the message out just when they're getting their ballot papers. But this is one of the obvious preparation techniques, things you can do early. And I promise you, it will save you a huge amount of time in the campaign when you'd rather be doing anything else, such as knocking on doors, and that's the way to do it. Now, many of you are familiar with the benefits of canvassing as opposed to any other campaign technique. Politics is, after all about people, and if we're not interested in people, we shouldn't really be trying to represent them, should we? So, let's try and meet as many of them as possible. Certainly in council elections, and to a lesser extent in a whole parliamentary constituency, we're winning votes at retail, not wholesale level. We're meeting people one by one, or two by two, family by family. And we want to make sure that they have a chance to meet the candidate, above all for council seats, and that we're recording what they tell us, not just which party they'll vote for, but also what issues are important. Because then, subsequently, whether we win the election or not, we can then get in touch with them again and say, well, that bus route you asked us about, this is the answer. Or that problem about the garages on the housing estate, we've found out this, etc. You can help people with things. I used to keep a file of all the thank you letters I got from people I'd helped when I was a councillor. And some of them are really touching, because it's lovely to feel that you can make a difference to people's lives. And that's what it's all about. And if you enjoy those things, then you'll have a whale of a time as a councillor, I can assure you, and hopefully as a Member of Parliament as well, for those of you who are standing, and I wish you every success with it. Now, today is also, was also scheduled as a handover of power, where I would pass on the torch to the next South East Chairman. Now, for technical reasons, the next South East Chairman won't be selected until next month, when the South East Committee will be meeting to pick somebody. So I'm not able to do that for you today. But it's interesting to compare how we do these things in UKIP, by the book and by process, compared with a similar selection process which is going on to decide who's going to be the next President of the European Commission. And clearly Mr Juncker thinks that he's got it all stitched up. And we were hearing earlier that maybe some of the other candidates think they've all got it stitched up for them. And it just isn't really, well, it's not really democracy, is it? It's not really cricket. It's not the way we want to do things. So we don't. At least, I think, if they're going to do things that way, behind closed doors and secretly, it's really an affront to democracy. It's an affront to the people that they pretend to represent. And it reminds me rather of the famous line attributed to Catherine the Great, who at least was a bit more open about dictatorship and things. And she said, supposedly at the start of her reign in the 1760s, "I shall be an autocrat, that's my trade, and the good Lord will forgive me, that's his." So I've tried to be as far from that mantra as possible over the last couple of years, and I'm sure things will continue in that vein. So therefore, we have a slight change from what's next on the programme. I've talked about some general things about the path to Westminster, where the party is, target seats, what we can be doing in the short term. I'd like, though, just to carry on that theme and develop that at a more local level. And so we thought, well, we'll invite someone with some experience of doing this to speak to us next on exactly that topic. So I'd like to invite the chairman of UKIP Beaconsfield, who's also the prospective parliamentary candidate for Beaconsfield, Tim Scott, to speak to us on that theme.
Well, good afternoon, conference. What a great afternoon it is. I seem to remember this is where we had the dinner 3 years ago. So it's great to be back for our regional conference where we had the national conference 3 years ago. You know, I came down last night and I had a very interesting journey down. It took me a bit longer than I thought because we had to go on a detour because the road up ahead was blocked. And looking ahead, I could see all sorts of commotion going on. There was press, there was police, there was people with binoculars and telescopes and these long-angle zoom lenses. Apparently they had just found Britain's last nesting pair of Liberal Democrats. Well, you know, I'm really proud of what we've done in UKIP, and I hope you are too. I'm proud, and I'm not complacent, because we've got a lot of work to do. We've come a long way, but I think what has got us to where we are is not going to be enough to get us to where we need to be. But we've got a fantastic base to go forward. And, you know, really, I think our political class really doesn't know what to do with us. I don't think they know what to make of us. I hope you can all read that. If you can't, Ed Miliband is saying to Clegg and Cameron, so are we still saying UKIP is racist? Cameron is saying, no, that was a disaster. We're now saying they were a flash in the pan. I think that's how they like to see us. You know, we're certainly giving the chattering classes something to chatter about, aren't we? And the Twitterati something to tweet about, and the commentariat something to comment on. And you know, the results at Newark did not halt the UKIP advance. The result at Newark confirmed the UKIP advance. That advance is going to continue. We are not stopping to dig in, let alone retreating. That advance is continuing. I thought I'd show you this. This was the meeting that Nigel did at the Emmanuel Centre in Westminster. Some of you may have gone to that, but actually it's our Facebook page. I'm sure some of you will recognise it. Facebook.com//the-UKIP. You'll see the little red arrow there. We now have over 200,000 likes on our Facebook page. So in other words, over 200,000 people are following UKIP's national Facebook page. If you are on Facebook and you haven't liked it yet, now's your opportunity if you've got one of those little gizmos with you, or maybe when you get home. And I gather we have overtaken both Labour and the Liberal Democrats for Facebook likes. And the Conservatives, I'm hearing, are only staying ahead of us by buying extra Facebook likes. I mean, this is what. How have the mighty fallen? They have to threaten their parliamentary candidates with the chop if they won't go to Newark, and they have to buy extra Facebook likes. Oh dear. Okay. Well, you know, didn't we do well? Over 4 million votes for the regional result, and as Nigel says, it's gone beyond the protest vote now. We are starting to build up our own core vote, people who will vote for UKIP regularly. And it wasn't just the 160 council seats that we won, we also had 850 second places, which I think is very, very encouraging as well. And the vote was very evenly split between North and South, and we are also the only party that has elected representation in all 4 countries of our United Kingdom. For the region, our average vote share was 32%. Our average increase from 2009 was 71%. Now, we've already seen this map, but I'll comment on it in a little bit more detail. If you like this kind of thing, there's a blog called something like, I think it's election-data.co.uk. This is where you can get this kind of thing from. Basically, this is a heat map, and the more purple, the better we did. And it's based on percentage of the vote across the region on the 22nd of May. So the more purple, the better we did. So you can see here some very, very encouraging results along the south coast, the Sussex coast, and in Kent. I've had a detailed look at the results right across the region, and I particularly, Janice and I would particularly like to commend the following branch. Well, I say branches, it's actually based on council areas rather than actually necessarily branches or parliamentary constituencies, but you will know who you are. The following branches nearly doubled, sorry, the following council areas nearly doubled or more than doubled their vote from 2009. Medway, Thanet, where I'm told we got 90% of the vote in some wards. Milton Keynes, Gravesham, Portsmouth, where we got 6 councillors elected. Shepway, Southampton, West Berkshire, Brighton, Crawley, Dartford, Dover, Maidstone, Sevenoaks, Slough, Swale, Ashford and Aylesbury. So well done to those branches. There were quite wide variations in the result across the region, so forget uniform swing. If we look at vote share, our top vote share was Thanet on a fantastic 46%, our lowest was 13%, and increase in the vote, our best increase in the vote was Dartford with 126%, and our lowest was, so well done Dartford, and our lowest was 36%. Okay. So let's drill down a little bit further. What do we need to be doing? Now this is, I did a talk at the regional conference last year on running an effective branch. So this recovers some of that area. And this is the kind of things that we need to be doing. I think Roger's quite right to say that we need to start lining up target wards and candidates for May 2015. Because I think for many, many branches, the 7th of May, yes, we've got a general election, yes, we must put up PPCs, parliamentary candidates across the region and across the whole country, but I think for many branches, the council elections will be just as important as the general election. And keep the activity going throughout the autumn. And fundraise, as Nigel quite rightly said. Now, here's some very, very simple ideas and areas where you can fundraise, because you're going to have to fundraise. Because for a start, you're going to have to find 500 quid deposit, which, of course, you will all get back, because we will all be winning more than 5% in May next year. I think we had about 400 lost deposits in 2010, costing us a lot of money, but that won't be happening again. So here are some very, very simple reasons, some very, very simple ideas, folks, where branches can be fundraising. I'll give you an example right at the end of my talk. How about this? A meal at a local restaurant or a curry house with a raffle. Pound in the pot every time you meet. Pass the pot round. Everybody puts some money in. Ask better off members. I mean, not everyone in UKIP is wealthy, is well off. But we have one particular member in our branch who gave us who gave the branch £1,000 last year, and he's given us another £1,000 this year. So you should know your membership, you should know where the better off areas, the better off roads are. This particular chap, it came from me ringing him up, asking him if he could help us out. He said he didn't think he could because he was quite elderly. I said, okay, so just on the off, I said to him, because I knew he lived in quite a nice road, shall we say, I said, do you think you might be able to support the branch financially? He said, oh, let me have a think about that. I'll speak to my wife and call you back. I thought, well, he's fobbing me off. But an hour later, the phone rang. He said, I've chatted to my wife, I'm going to send you a cheque for £1,000. So, if you ask people for money, it does work. How about standing orders? Getting members to support the branch by standing order. Get your treasurer to make up a standing order, and then, maybe 20 members. Can you find 20 members who can give £2 a month by standing order into your branch bank account? If you can, that's £480 a year, and that's your deposit. That's your £500 deposit, isn't it, for the election? And it's a regular, dependable income that you can rely on. Now here's a really radical idea for fundraising: recruit new members. Just make sure you get the cheque first. And can you do something like a Sunday lunch or a barbecue and charge £5 a head? This sort of stuff is really very simple stuff. General elections, start to look ahead, review your past results. Where have you done well? Where have you done not so well? We tend to do better in the less posh areas, to be honest. I don't know what it's like in your branch. Start to build up a war chest, fundraise, make sure you've got some money there. Bolster your committee. Have you got someone who could be treasurer, not just to keep the books, but also do the fundraising as well? I noticed Eastbourne branch, as well as having a chairman, they have a branch organiser. I think that's a fantastic idea. The chairman can't do everything, so to have someone like that who can be the person who organises the leafleting, prints off the maps, makes sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time, is very good. Communicate with members by letter. Not everyone's on email. Make sure you've got have you got an email list for your branch? We've got about 130 members. We've got emails for about 90. Not everyone's on email. But get yourself an email list for your branch. And it's a good way to communicate with most members relatively quickly. Get out and get seen. Now, talking of getting out and getting seen, here we are, the Saturday before polling day, which would have been what, May the 17th or something. You might remember it was a lovely sunny day, and we had on your right this fantastic trailer that Aylesbury branch had brought, and some members of ours had a horse box, and we drove around the constituency playing one of Nigel's speeches. It was the closing minute from his second debate with Nick Clegg, the Come and Join the People's Army one, and we set it to the Great Escape theme. And Chris Adams and I, and also John Gooding, who's here, and John Fagan, whose horse box it was, we had great fun. Now, not every branch can get one of these big advertising trailers. Not every branch can get their hands on a horse box, but have you got someone in your branch with a trailer? Have you got someone in your branch with a caravan? This kind of thing. Or a van that you can put those were 4x4s on the side of the horse box. I think most branches, whilst you may not be able to come up with this huge advertising trailer, most branches, if you put a bit of thought into it, could do this. I think Jason Kent probably covered this pretty well. Get your boards up, get your signs up. So I won't go over that point. Now, I'm a big fan of street stalls. Hands up if your branch does street stalls. Give us a quick. Okay. Well, okay. A smattering. Well, I think most branches should be doing street stalls. It's not difficult. I mean, here we are. We had a little bit of help from Hillingdon branch there. Some of you might recognise Cliff Dixon there in the middle, chairman of Hillingdon branch. We kind of help each other out occasionally. Street stalls not difficult. You need a table. You need 2 of you, minimum. You need something to go along the front. We've got a purpose-made banner, but actually, if you can't stretch to that, there's a UKIP flag from the UKIP shop that you can buy, which you can put along the front. You need something to go on the table. You need something for people to sign. And Saturday mornings, as long as it's not lashing down with rain. It's a really good way to get out and get seen. Don't forget public meetings. I think we're at a stage now where UKIP is well enough known. We are infamous enough now, I think, to be able to put public meetings on without having to rely on Nigel to get the bums on seats, and I think Nigel's got a lot of other stuff to do. So this was just a public meeting that was put on by in Wallingford in Oxfordshire during the EU election campaign, put on there by the parliamentary candidate Lee Upcraft. Think about doing public meetings, maybe with a neighbouring branch. We're thinking of doing one jointly with Cheshire and Amersham branch with Diane James in the October. And the leafleting, I mean, every person who comes, particularly if you can get an advert in the local paper as well, every person who comes, a good 10 or 20 will know that it's on. Okay, last but not least, I hope you will forgive me if I give a quick plug for this event, but it's an illustration of how branches can raise money and get people involved. If you like it, there's something in it for you. On Sunday the 20th of July, we have Paul Nuttall coming to the Old Bengal restaurant in Beaconsfield. If your branch can get there, junction 2 of the M40, not that far off the M25, if you can book a table of at least 4 and book it in one go, then the £5 margin that we're making on the tickets can be yours. 19 quid, and it is now open for booking at paulnuttall.eventbrite.co.uk. My friends, I'm so proud to be in UKIP. I'm so proud of what we've done. I'm now more confident than ever that we can win Westminster seats next year. Let's do it. Thank you.
Tim reminded me there of a very interesting fact in talking about the 4.3 million, or in fact nearly 4.4 million people who voted UKIP in the European elections in the South East region this year. Just hang on to that figure for a moment. Nearly 4.4 million across the South East region. That's more votes than the Conservatives got in the South East region in 2009 and 1999 and 1994. They didn't get as many as that, and even in 2004 they only got just about 20,000 more than we got this year. And this is supposedly the Conservative heartland. So that's one idea to take away with you. Just how secure is that for them? Well, we'll get to prove it next year as well. Now, one great thing about being chairman is I get to say thank you to various people. Now, we've already thanked Rob Burberry for all his hard work in putting on today's events. There is one absent friend who can't be with us today, who's retiring after 12 years of faithful service working for UKIP, working for Nigel directly, and that's Regional Organiser Steve Harris. And I'd just like to give him a round of applause. So Steve has been regional organiser for 12 years and has finally hung up his canvassing boots following the successful conclusion of this election. And he and others have brought us a very long way in that time, and it's going to be a tough act to follow. Our new regional organiser, I think I can announce this safely, can't I? Do you want to come up to the front? That's the spirit. Our new regional organiser is Chris Adams. Today, Chris, so I thought it was high time to have you up here, plus which Nigel wanted you particularly to put in a plug about those thank you leaflets, which I know have worked very well for you in the past. So do you want to say a word next?
Yeah. Hello there, Eastbourne, how are you? I just wanted to say a few words to begin with. I am highly honoured, basically, to accept this position. I think most people know me very, very well. You've certainly heard my name mentioned. I'm trying to hide away. I've put a little thing on my phone called a call blocker on there now because it's got that busy. But one thing I can say is to be the new regional organiser, I will help every one of you as much as possible, but please phone at a reasonable time. As you can see, 2 months ago, I used to weigh 15 stone 6. I now weigh 13 stone 4. So, it's not not stress, but basically it's eating properly, but also working usually till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. But some of the things that we've got that we're going to change in the region, basically we're going to be liaising between local party members and their elected members, candidates, councillors, MEPs. We're going to be managing projects and events to promote this party in the South East. We're going to be maintaining our party memberships and increasing it. We're going to be organised, we're going to be printing, and authorisation of political leaflets will come through myself and the new campaign organiser when that appointment is made. Also, we've talked about raising funds rather a lot today, and we're going to continue doing that. Some of the jobs that I do is what's called a deputy nominating officer, and that means that every council candidate that has stood over the last 2 years, I have to authorise you to be a candidate. And that's taken rather a lot of time. But on the night before the nominations closed, we have a candidate here that I met basically, or a representative of a branch from Portsmouth, and basically we signed her nomination paper and the DNO certificate at 11 o'clock at night in Guildford Spectrum Leisure Centre car park. The next day, everyone voted, and when the results came out, she didn't put out a leaflet, she didn't campaign, but guess what? She got elected. I was absolutely thrilled to bits because we did get 33 new elected councillors. So well done to those elected councillors this year. What I think we need to do, there are going to be 2 assistants that will be, it'll be basically announced within, I should think, in the next couple of weeks, and you'll get to know these people, and they'll be helping me with the team, supporting the MEPs, supporting you as branches and the candidates. We're also in charge of parliamentary assessments, and in the South East we are definitely leading the way with this. The next assessment date will be the 28th of June in Kent. So if you haven't had a parliamentary assessment, apply for that, and that will be up on the My UKIP website on Monday. But basically what we can see for the years ahead, coming up to the general election next year, it's all about education and training. And what we're going to do is we're going to put on special sessions all the way up to the general election on public speaking. We're going to do seminars on election law. We're going to do sessions that I'm doing after this conference at 4:30 on basic agent training, and also canvassing, how to canvass properly, and also how to run a campaign. That's all I've got to say at this moment in time, but if you need my help, I'm more than happy to speak to you on the telephone or send me an email, and God bless this party. Thank you.
Just a final reminder, do make sure that you pick up Rob Burberry's idea earlier that Nigel's very keen on, and it's worked very well for Chris Adams, about those thank you leaflets, thanking the voters, because staying in touch with those people who voted for us is going to be very important, and it's well worth doing. So do speak to Rob Burberry or to Chris about that. Now, the fun isn't quite over, because there are a couple of optional breakout sessions which will be taking place now. There's campaign training over there in what's I think called the bistro, a bit of the bar, and that's going to be run by Councillor Piers Walker, and over on the other side, in what was previously the exhibition area, that will be the agent training, and that will be a session being organised by Councillor Chris Adams, as he was just describing. Those are not compulsory. We're not going to lock the doors and stop you from getting out if you don't want to go to those. But if you're a really avid enthusiast and don't want to go out in the sunshine, then that could be just your thing. I do recommend it. They are two of the best campaigners that we've got in the South East, both experienced as candidates and campaign managers, and they do have a huge amount of experience to share with you. These sessions are very worthwhile. So we're coming to an end now. It's almost exactly 4 o'clock, which is our scheduled finishing time. I'd like to thank all of you very much for coming and joining us in Eastbourne today, and I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you very much.